What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 29 of the Drunken Boxing Podcast, coming to you from a suddenly very cold and definitely winter Beijing. Okay, let's dive right into some general news and info. Let me once again promote a company located here in China, up in Dalian, which produces excellent swords. The Hanwei Sword Company has a long history, being first established in 1990, and with that are one of the most experienced bladesmiths in the field here. While the company is well known overseas, I am still surprised when I speak to people who are not familiar with them, particularly Chinese martial artists. Hanwei Forge produces not only Chinese-style swords and weaponry, but they also produce Japanese swords as well as European swords. They are meticulous about their products and have a high standard of quality that they adhere to, which sets them apart from many such companies. Personally, I have a few of their swords. Lately, I've been playing with one of their Miaodao swords, which is quite nice, and I highly recommend their products. They range from basic entry-level items all the way up to exquisite collector's pieces. You may view their products at their official website, which is hanweimetal.com. While the website is in Chinese, it is quite self-explanatory, and the general manager, Mr. Gilbertpoon, can speak English and is highly accommodating to customers. So if you have any queries or would like to contact them for an order, you may do so by email. The email address is gilbertpoon@hanweimetal.net. I'll put the links in the show notes and the description. Okay, moving on. I have been contacted many times by listeners asking if I know of a good distance Chinese learning program. Being involved in Chinese martial arts and its related cultures, having some Chinese language proficiency is always going to help you with your endeavors in learning these arts that we love. With that, I can highly recommend eChinese Learning. They are a well-established company based in China and operating internationally, and they offer one-on-one online language training for people wishing to learn Chinese. They offer tailor-made programs based on each person's individual needs, whether you're looking to pass Chinese language proficiency tests, or to learn business Chinese for work, or to just learn as a hobby for everyday Chinese. Being a professional company, they are available for you to set up your lessons at any time that suits you 24/7, which is quite useful if you have a tight schedule. All their teachers are professional language teachers, and they are well established in the industry. Listeners of the Drunken Boxing Podcast can sign up for a free trial lesson, no strings attached, by going to the link listed in both the show notes and the description today. If you are keen on learning the Chinese language, give them a try. Okay, let's get into some Mushin martial culture news. I have released a further couple of episodes of the lecture my Shifu Di Guoyong gave at Peking University years ago. There is probably one more episode left to conclude that series. I have also started to release parts from an exclusive interview I did with Xu Xiaodong this past summer. I'm going to be releasing it in parts, and some of the interview will only be available on my Patreon platform due to the nature of some aspects of what was discussed. I hope you guys can understand that. The interview ran quite long. It's over 40 minutes in length, and we discussed many aspects to clear up both the history and the reality of what occurred and the circumstances surrounding it in the many instances of Xu Xiaodong's actions lately. Well, over this period. So, go take a look if you're interested. Part 1 is out. I'll probably release part 2 soon. It's over on the YouTube channel, Mushin Martial Culture. Okay, I have also just returned from a great trip to the grasslands of Inner Mongolia, where I visited my friend Lavelle Marshall. Some of you may remember Lavelle from a previous podcast episode, and he is still out there in the grasslands training and learning Mongolian wrestling the way it is meant to be learnt. I will be releasing some upcoming videos covering this trip and Lavelle and his pioneering work out there soon. Okay, so once again, head on over to the Mushin Martial Culture YouTube channel and check all this content out, and you can subscribe if you haven't yet to be kept up to date with new releases. Your support on Patreon enables me to continue to produce the content that I do. I'm truly thankful for any and all support. If you enjoy my endeavors and would like to pledge some support for the podcast or the channel as a whole, you may do so through the Patreon site. The Patreon site may be found at patreon.com/Mushin Martial Culture. That's all one word, Mushin Martial Culture. And for those of you that are looking to study the arts of Xingyiquan and Baguazhang, on the Mushin Martial Culture Patreon site, apart from the general support tiers, you will find a third tier, the Huajin tier, which is the online learning tier. Here, you have the ability to study the arts of Xingyiquan and Baguazhang from me through a comprehensive program which features in-depth lesson videos and learning support. The lesson content on the platform is continually growing. Another way you can support my endeavors is by purchasing any of the Mushin martial culture merchandise available on our Teespring store. This includes various t-shirts and other items. I am trying to regularly release new designs as they are completed, so check it out. You can view the merchandise at the Mushin Martial Culture Teespring store. The link is in the show notes, or you may simply search for Mushin Martial Culture within the Teespring site itself, which is teespring.com. That's T-E-E spring.com. Alright, on to today's fantastic episode. My guest today is Brendan Tunks, who resides in Australia. Brendan is a 7-star Mantis practitioner who started his training in the art in Canberra back in 1992 under Wang Xiaohua. In 1997, he started his training in Qingdao, China, under the late Zhiqiang and Qiming and Qiyu. He has experience in competing in various combat formats, including barehanded and those with weapons, as well as Sanda, submission grappling, and he has also fought in the one and only edition of Tang Lang, or Mantis, free fighting competition, which took place in Qingdao, China, in 1999. He continues to train and teach students who have won numerous titles in various combat sports, including kickboxing, boxing, MMA, Lethwei, and Muay Thai. More recently, over on the excellent Monkey Steals Peach YouTube channel, Will released a series of episodes with Brendan, where you can see his depth of knowledge and skill in the art of 7-star Mantis. Go take a look if you haven't already. The links to those videos are also in the show notes. I had a great time discussing the arts with Brendan, so let's get stuck into it. Here is Brendan Tunks. Okay, welcome to the Drunken Boxing Podcast, Brendan Tunks, all the way from Australia. Winter for you, summer for me. I'm melting, you're probably freezing, but I guess it's the yin and yang effect for us right now, yeah?
Yeah, it's pretty cold here, not Beijing levels, but yeah, thanks for having me as well. Thank you.
All right, well, you're a good friend of Will. I've known Will for some time. I think a lot of people know Will from Monkey Steals Peach, and most recently he did a couple of episodes with you, which I thought were fantastic. What you displayed, your Mantis, your understanding, and even just your outlook and your approach to training in general. I thought it was very good. I think it's very relevant, but I think it's very important for today's day and age. So it was great to see. If we can... Yeah,
Will kind of dragged that out of me. He dragged that out of me. I'm actually not very used to kind of, showing what I've got to show or saying what I feel like I need to say. So Will's pretty persistent, and yeah, that's what the result was. He dragged that out of me.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people are like that. I myself, for many years, was not very keen on just engaging, showing, and doing. But I think, and I mean, I must be honest, I think it was probably the occurrences in China over the last 5-6 years that pushed me to be a little bit more visible, but not for myself, more in lines of just kind of countering the common mainstream rhetoric that was circulating and still is to a large degree in the world today about Chinese martial arts, just to show a different side of things. So it's good that you did.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I agree. That's one of the drivers that I've tried many excuses as to why I wouldn't show anything, say anything, or engage with people. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, if we don't put some alternative viewpoints or show something different and throw it in the mix, then the masses are going to receive a very one-sided story.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Will's given me a little bit of, over the years, he's given me a little bit of information about you. You've had quite an interesting history. So maybe, some people know about you, some people don't. So maybe we could go from the beginning about your path, where it started, your background, etc. So it's...
Yeah, okay. I mean, if you want me to go right back to the very beginning, around year 3 in primary school, like a lot of the people that you've spoken to, I began with judo. And I was already interested in martial arts before that, but it was what was accessible. And technically, I wasn't. My family didn't really want me involved in martial arts, and it was just by chance that a friend of mine, his uncle, ran a school very close to where I live, and my family weren't even keen to, put up the money for the gi and for the fees, and luckily they allowed me to train there in the beginning for free. And so I kind of just went along out of curiosity with a friend. Even though I always wanted to do martial arts, I wanted more punching, kicking, and weapons. But what was around back then in the late 70s, early 80s in the town where I live was basically only Japanese martial arts. And although before that, I was very interested, as I said, in weapon work. I was pretty obsessed with Journey to the West, the Monkey King and these sort of things. So when I was very young, in 1981, there was a touring Beijing opera troupe that came to Canberra, and they demonstrated, and that especially Danao Tiangun, I was watching like the stick work, and all the Wu-Sung stuff throughout that opera, but sorry, the martial opera stuff, but particularly White Snake Mountain and the Monkey King creates havoc in heaven. I was a small kid and I was blown away with that stuff. And
so you saw the Monkey King,
sort of obsessed with.
Yeah, you saw the. Sorry to interrupt, because you're the second person, or maybe even the third Australian person that told me the Monkey King was the reason why they wanted to get into martial arts, and particularly Chinese martial arts. And it's quite interesting because we didn't have, like, I think you had Monkey Magic on TV there, didn't you?
Yep.
We didn't really.
Yeah, we did. So,
we didn't have that. Like, I mean, in a lot of the Western countries, they haven't seen that show, but you guys had it. So it was a. Would you say that's quite a big catalyst in Australia for people getting into Chinese martial arts?
It was. So in the UK, in New Zealand, and Australia, I know for sure, and possibly maybe even Canada, but it was a Japanese production. But the BBC dubbed it into English, and it was like an after-school, Monday to Friday thing, and it was like the whole. Journey to the West, but it was, quite sort of violent fight scenes for kids back then, like people being sort of, having their necks broken with like halberds and like being killed with punches, and, it was like pretty dramatic, and so it drew kids in. But, I read, the English translation of Journey to the West prior to or around the same time, and it was the end of sort of ping pong diplomacy time. The Terracotta Warriors toured. They brought them out here to Australia around 80 or 81. And so in the same year, a troupe from Beijing came. And actually in 1975, in my hometown, and I didn't find this out until recent years, the Chinese Wushu team came here, including Yu Hai, who was one of, originally a 7-star Mantis guy before he became a modern Wushu person.
Right,
so
right.
They actually came here and performed, in the mid-70s with the touring team, which one of my teachers, who became one of my teachers, actually was a part of that touring team that performed on the lawns of the White House and in front of President Nixon and Henry Kissinger.
Right.
So anyway, I'm probably getting a bit down the track there, but all these things sort of linked up. But yeah, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Monkey, both the Japanese and BBC production, but also I saw the opera at 81, and yourself. Okay, a lot of people find Beijing opera boring, but the martial skills of the people in the opera who play the martial roles are actually incredible. Their Qiming is unbelievable, and the way they train and what they can do, even though it is mainly for show. A lot of people don't realize some of those people have some legitimate martial skills, and the stuff with the weapons, I was a kid, it blew me away. So I wanted to do Chinese martial arts, but it was inaccessible to me. So judo came along, and I did that for a few years.
Same with me. I mean, I started with judo as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good. It gave me a good base, but I always liked striking, and I thought I could strike well enough. But in high school, in year 7, I thought I was a lot tougher than I was, and I used to fight whenever I had the chance to fight, and I ended up getting smashed basically by a kid who I should have beaten, and it was basically because I had pathetic striking. I could throw, I could grapple, and I could throw haymakers, but this kid was just stronger, not necessarily much bigger, but I quickly learned that what I had wasn't enough, and so I really got spurred on then in 1984 to try and learn proper striking. And again, still, even though I wanted to do Chinese martial arts, it was Japanese martial arts. So I started doing karate in year 7.
Wow.
Yeah, and I did that kind of all the way through high school until I was able to study Chinese martial arts.
Do you know what style of karate you were doing? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's called Shobukai, but it's like an offshoot of Shitoryu. So it was founded by Sadaharu Fujimoto, who's like was like a long-time coach of the Japanese national team and pretty highly decorated himself, and quite a solid martial artist. But the thing was, the guy that ran it here, he's a pretty rough and tumble Croatian dude who was, and there was a lot of like pretty rugged people in this school who liked to fight, and you could learn to fight. You could go there, and it didn't matter if you were a wimp or nobody where you came from. When you came in and turned up in this school, you would learn how to fight. So we actually got a lot of really good, high quality sparring in, and a couple of the coaches. One of them was a special operations group, like a police officer who was sort of basically a part of the riot squad. And another guy was a British guy who had a bit of a boxing background. So a couple of different coaches, and then the head coach himself, who was like a hardcore old school karate guy, like you had different approaches from all these three teachers. And, we really got a grip on fighting pretty quickly. Like, it didn't matter whether you sort of had it or not, you picked it up if you stayed around there long enough. It was a pretty, rough and tumble school. So it wasn't necessarily much of a emphasis on kata. In fact, we sparred quite a lot, but we also did like really crazy sort of conditioning stuff and all that typical silly stuff like jumping push-ups on your knuckles on gravel and all that macho business. But when you're a little kid, that stuff is good. Like that's what you need. And I was looking for that. And, I started, I learned how to punch in straight lines. I learned how to defend. I learned about footwork, and, I was able to suddenly, put it together a bit and start to be able to fight a little bit more effectively. Yeah. So, yeah. But I was still looking for Chinese martial arts. So.
Sure. A lot of people today don't actually, especially younger generations, don't actually realize that there is a stark difference even between JKA of like 30 years ago, which would be standardized World Championship Karate, if you want to call it something, and today's version of sport karate. I mean, there is such a difference. The old generation were hard people. They especially those first few generations in Japan. I mean, you mentioned your instructor learned under one of those older generation guys, and they were very hard people. They were physically hard, they were conditioned, they were really good at their kata and their technique, and they could really fight, and they would bloody each other up every day. This was normal. I mean, you went from judo to karate, I went from judo to karate as well. My family, my uncle particularly, my dad as well as his other brother, but there's three brothers, my dad and two brothers. The eldest one was a Shukokai instructor, but all three of them did karate, and with that generation is completely different to today's generation. You're talking about push-ups on knuckles and things like that. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Richard Amos. He wrote a book recently, and I actually just read it recently, and he was the first European, I think, to graduate the JK instructor's course, like way back when in the 80s,
Yeah.
And he wrote a memoir, and he was talking about these things. I mean, these guys you'd get an often situation where guys are going to the hospital. This is normal, once a week.
Sure.
Lips getting split open, bare knuckles, skin coming off, all sorts of, and the instructors are not like, oh, I'm sorry. They're like, you're bleeding, and he's still going to hit you again. They were different generations. So I can believe that kind of generation of people will develop people that are fully capable of combat. That's different to today. It's different.
It attracted different people too. Like I don't want to generalize, but I will continuously throughout this conversation. But I think unfortunately martial arts does tend to attract a lot of nerds, and I'm not saying that it didn't attract nerds back then either, but they kind of didn't last long because back then there weren't many avenues for people to learn. I mean, this is before people had access to Thai boxing here. If people wanted, the tough guys back then did do old school, kung fu, or we'll call it kung fu as everyone else does, or karate, and they fought a lot, and like you said, busted noses, broken cheekbones, broken eye sockets. It was all the time. It was sparring with no protective gear.
Zero.
And then that's it. And then in the advent of kickboxing in the sort of 80s, these are the people that were the first generation kickboxers. In fact, in Australia, the pioneers of kickboxing largely come out of the Chinese martial arts world, which is interesting because that's different from a lot of countries. Most countries, it was the karate people. In Australia, a lot of the pioneers are actually Chinese martial arts practitioners. So that's interesting. But there was one guy in Canberra who has been teaching here since the 60s, but he was on the other side of town. I never really came across him, so I still was in love with karate. I found it was good. It gave me noticeable results, and then I started to even think, well, maybe there's no point studying Chinese martial arts, because I sort of almost started to buy into even back then, the idea that Chinese martial arts was rubbish. Like, it wasn't that good if you wanted to fight. But in the sort of early 80s, one of my school teachers was a student of William Zheng in Wing Chun. And, he knew I was obsessed with karate, and he sort of said, well, what do you know about Wing Chun? And I was like, well, nothing really. I mean, I'd read about it. I'd read like sort of Samuel Kwok's books, and I knew all about Yip Man, and I used to get magazines imported from overseas and stuff, and I followed it, but I'd never trained it. So he kind of showed me a few things, and showed me the mechanics of punching, and just basic center line control and deflection, and that kind of stuff, and a bit of sticky hands. No, I didn't do Silim Tao, any of that stuff. I just did hands-on stuff a little bit, and that was enough to open my eyes. So it was it just seemed so streamlined and quick, and it's just totally different. And I was like, okay, cool. So I want to learn this, but I didn't end up studying under him for any long period of time. It was just an introduction,
right?
But it made me search for what was around, and in those days there wasn't much around, like I said. And there was one school here that actually taught. They sort of kind of promoted that they taught Shaolin, but it was really they taught modern wushu. Changquan, basically, via a guy from Malaysia who studied in Beijing. Okay. And but they taught one Shaolin routine and a little bit of Lohan Gong and some weapons, and but it was good enough, like in those times. So I went there and I studied the basic Sanlu Changquan, the fundamental number 3 routine Changquan and 5-step boxing, and and I started to do some Dui Liang routines and some conditioning, and I was getting into it. I knew it was modern wushu, but I didn't really care.
What year was this? Was this?
That would have been about 86.
Okay, so it's still fairly an older generation of wushu athlete. I mean, in comparison to today's, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, all that stuff that we were practicing had its origins in the 50s, like I think 1956. So it's like that 1, 2, and 3. They still teach it in a lot of schools now, but that's kind of like sort of from the era of what people sometimes call golden era wushu, if they're into competitive wushu, which is like the crossover of people that came from traditional backgrounds but competed under the modern sports set and rules, right. But there were still some legitimate traditional athletes in there, and there was still some real kung fu. I mean, I'm not saying that modern wushu now is completely devoid of it, but back then it was a little bit more linked to what we can consider.
I would say that modern wushu has a lot of physical, in terms of physical ability and what we understand by the basic building blocks of being able to do physical actions. So in a sense, in the classical Greek terminology, a gymnastic ability. I'm not talking about gymnastic as a sport, because...
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I would say that today's modern wushu athletes are, extremely talented physically, but to go so far and to equate that today into martial arts, it's a far stretch for me. And I did sport wushu. Like you, your story sounds very similar to mine, because I also started with a athlete from the golden age of wushu, and that was what I started training in way before the Nandu rules were in. And that was a beautiful era. And especially at my age then, I thought it was very fitting. But I must honestly say, and I've worked in the field for so long as well. I worked in the professional field. It's not just the people. You raised a good point. You said a lot of those people in the first generation, they had some traditional background, and then they started competing under the sport wushu movement. That's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is the rules of the competition themselves. And today it's gone so far away in both of those aspects that it's very hard to salvage. It's very hard to salvage.
No.
But nothing to take away from them physically. Physically, they're phenomenal physical specimens. So.
They are, until their joints are ruined catastrophically, and they basically can't walk in their 50s. But that's not all of them. And people sometimes take the piss and say they're not real martial artists, mate. Some of those people, as you very well know, are phenomenal athletes, and you can teach them so quickly, and they can pick up anything, and their bodies are basically so programmable because of their fundamentals that the athletes themselves are unbelievable. However, Nandu is like to me was kind of sort of death knell,
Yeah.
and things like 720 aerials and, marble that's almost 2 meters wide, and just like losing, yeah, we know you've probably talked about this a million times, but yeah, I mean, there still is some merit in it. But yeah, it's to me, as my teacher agrees, it's not a sport that is accessible by the normal everyday person. Those athletes that are training at the Olympic standard.
Well, that's
even
the
if
thing.
they're just at a.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that's it.
At the end of the day, the more focus and the Nandu is just a component, right? If we just look at it separately, for the listeners, Nandu is those degree of difficulty techniques, so those crazy jumps and spins and additional rotations and things like that. But the focus of the rules and the scoring criteria being so predicated on that means that in order to be competitive, you have to do that perfectly, and you have to do it at a ridiculous level. And in order to do that, you have to spend most of your day, not just a couple of times a week, but you have to do it every single day, focusing on that alone for the majority of the time in order to be able to execute it. So it gets further and further away, not only from people's average common Joe's ability to do it, but further and further away from practicing all the other aspects that should be included in Chinese martial arts. So, it's just a gradual thing that's gone further away. So the death knell, as you said, was this, and the death knell was also the focus on this. So it's
yeah. I mean, the other thing too, like I said, it's not just Nandu, but look, on average, most of them can't actually throw a proper punch.
Nope.
I mean, or a proper kick, or project the kind of force that is absolutely a prerequisite of any traditional martial art. That, like you said, they don't have time to work on that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't score high, and so therefore, the amount of practice they put into that, and it's like their stance work. They just don't do it. They only do transitional stance work. They don't need it. It's not important. So, yeah, it's a shame, because it could have been something good, but yeah, I think to me it's way past.
No, totally.
Yep.
Totally. I mean, I remember I used to teach international judges courses. I mean, I was in the technical committee until 2018, and I remember in 2018, I was actually teaching the Asian course. I was teaching the one component of the Asian judges course, and I remember I just wanted to show something, and I had to show it. So I pulled up some old school videos and compared it to new school videos, and I said, which one do you think is more difficult? I mean, if you look at the individual rotations and whatever for the modern routines, sure, those are pretty difficult, but the overall routine with the transitions, the content of the routine, the wide variety of techniques, apart from all of that, the older generation, that golden age, it's far more difficult, because now you have to do all of that plus, and then I put up a video of a girl who had won domestically, like a national championships, and I was just freeze framing it and showing, like, she was doing a thrusting punch and she couldn't even align her knuckles. Her knuckles weren't even aligned. And I was like, can we see that? Can we admit we have a problem now? And that was the last year I was with the organization, by the way. But I mean, it was.
Well, they wouldn't have liked that, I imagine.
Yeah, well, of course not. But so.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to admit we have a problem. We have to admit, and the issue is the rules are one thing. For me, I mean, I've had, as I've said, and I don't want to make this conversation about sport wushu, so I'm going to get off this in a minute, but it's the it's the people that are involved, and the whole way the organization is set up that puts those people involved, that is basically, in my opinion, unless all of that changes, it's not going to fix. It's not going to get fixed. So, yeah.
And that's not going to happen. It's those kind of embedded structures, they're not going to be removed. Right. And that's not just in sport wushu, that's throughout the whole of society, so unfortunately. But I agree.
Well, coming back to your story, who was this person that you if you're open to speaking?
I mean, they were just local Aussies that I think came from a Tai Chi background, really, but there was a Malaysian guy who had trained in Beijing for a while, who was trying to promote wushu in Australia and the South Pacific, and but they kind of marketed that they were teaching Shaolin boxing, but they taught some routines which weren't modern wushu, but they weren't, from my understanding now, actually Shaolin boxing, but a little bit of stick, this and that and the other. I wasn't there very long because I wanted to fight, and so I sort of said to them, like, look, I want to fight, I I went into kickboxing fights, and they're like, yeah, we don't do that here. And I was like, yeah, cool. Well, I'm going to enter anyway. So can you help at all? And they're like, not really. Yeah, you'll have to do that on your own. And I was like, all right, cool. So I did do that on my own. I actually entered my first few kickboxing fights basically self-coached without a corner. I had my brother come for my first fight, flew in from like either he came from Mount Isa or Sydney, flew down, all the way down here, and came basically as I was stepping into the ring. And I coached myself, and I still went in there and basically said that I came from the ACT Wushu Academy or whatever. You had to have a club. You couldn't just enter as a nobody. And so I entered a few kickboxing bouts, trying to use it would have been a fusion, no doubt, of my Japanese martial arts, Chinese martial arts, or whatever. It was basically just me going in there and brawling on my own under the name of Chinese martial arts. But so I did that for like a couple of years, and then I stopped training there because when I realized that they actually couldn't teach fighting, didn't understand it, weren't interested in it, then I sort of had to do something else. And I was lucky that in 1988 I met a teacher from mainland China who was actually brought out here by someone who was associated with that first academy. And he was from Shanghai, and he basically had an interesting kind of mix of stuff that he was teaching, which was a mix of internal and Xingyi and Xinyi as well. And but the fundamentals that he taught was mainly Shilu Tantui, so spring leg and basic cha chuan. So I studied that with him for a couple of years. I loved it. This guy, he corrected everything. He put you into proper postures. He showed you power. He had pretty unbelievable chin na at that stage, that the best I'd seen. He was like one of those people that had like an iron grip, but a completely soft, arm. There was like a marshmallow, but you couldn't move him. You could, his paida was unbelievable. He was a tiny little guy, but all the kind of things that would make a young, keen kid who was looking for this basically just fall in love with it. And I did, and I trained really hard. Like I trained a lot. I was doing stupid things like sitting in horse stands and throwing over 2,000 punches a day. And I had a sandbag, and I would just, go out the backyard and hit the sandbag for like 3 hours. I was doing conditioning on steel posts and low walking, and just I was fanatically training. I've always been a bit of a fanatic in whatever I've got into. And so I kind of did that for a couple of years. And that didn't last because I was still fighting a lot and not necessarily in the ring, and he didn't like the idea that I was fighting with his stuff. And I would come into training with like busted nose or black eyes or cuts all over my neck and my face scratched up. He knew what I was doing. He wasn't that kind of person. He's a very, very good man. Like he's a Chinese medicine practitioner, very traditional, very conservative, very gentle. I think he probably liked me because of my fanaticism with training, and I was always very respectful, but I think he also probably thought I was a pain in the ass. So he kind of suggested maybe I should find something else.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Like he didn't kick me out. He was really cool. He actually said to me, he just said, look, I know what you want to do. And, he was the first guy, he sort of said to me, like, I think you need to go to China. And he was trying to tell me you should go train Sanda in China. And I was like, but he didn't know how to say Sanda in English, so he was kind of translating in English as
free fighting,
wild fight or random fight. And I was like, I sort of knew what he was talking about.
you mean you didn't think he told you to go fly over to China and fight random strangers on the street?
Yeah, no. Oh, possibly. But there was that happened later on anyway. But at around the same time, I entered a couple of what was called Oriental Rules freestyle, not kickboxing. It was basically what was a precursor to modified Thai. So I don't know.
Right.
You're from South Africa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have modified Thai, which is basically kickboxing with knees.
Yeah.
You can clinch, but you can't elbow.
No elbows.
It's kind of the bridge between kickboxing, and full Muay Thai. And full Muay Thai was actually only just coming about in these years. So there was another thing called Oriental Rules, which the Australian sort of Kung Fu Wushu Association would put on fights in Sydney mainly. In fact, there was a couple of schools that were doing it, and anyone from any style would come, and you had boxing gloves on, and you just basically went out there and just wailed into each other. So no elbows, but everything else was permitted, and no reaping throws, or you could clinch. I think there was a 5 or 10 second limit in the clinch, but it was basically Australian version of Sanda. So,
Right.
but a lot messier, sloppier, and with referees, which were basically boxing or kickboxing referees. So I entered a couple of those, and so I was already dabbling in that kind of stuff. But yeah, so he suggested maybe I should try and look for someone who could coach me in that. And yeah, there was no one here doing it. I had done a little bit of training with a guy from Laos who taught me a bit of Muay Thai while I was getting ready for one of my kickboxing fights. So I did get a taste of that, and I did like that. But there was no fully established Thai boxing schools in Canberra. There were karate schools that started to make the transition into Thai boxing, and they started to teach their version of it. But yeah, so I was kind of in the wilderness for a bit there and just doing my own thing. And then in like I think 91, I went back to that Wushu school because I just wanted to train. So, and I liked the kicks, I like kicking drills, and I went back there for a while, and I just happened to run into a guy there who was there this time who wasn't there before, and he was from mainland China. And, he was a little bit we sort of fought arrogant, but because we didn't realize that he actually had a substantial training background. We knew he was good, but he moved differently. And me and my very good friend Mac David, we were there training together, and we were mainly laughing at all the people in the school because they were all like aging hippies, and we sort of wanted to like we do partner drills and like hit contact with them, and they were like, you're not supposed to contact, and we were like, what the
well,
you know what I mean? Like
then?
it was that kind of it was frowned upon. They didn't like us because we actually used to like hit and move and push and throw, and they thought we were idiots. And it was really a sort of almost like a yoga hippie type crowd. It was terrible. But this one Chinese dude there was fit. He was built like a tank. He moved really fast, and we were like, what does this guy get his mechanics from? Because he moved really differently. And at the end of the class, sometimes he'd go off around the back and he'd do his own thing, and then I kind of sort of went and spied on him after one of the classes, and I watched him doing this form, and he was like on 1,000 miles an hour. And I recognized it, and it was Mantis boxing, and I sort of said to him, like, what's that? Like, what are you doing? Are you doing Mantis boxing? And he's like, yeah. Like, and he said, how do you know what that is? I said, I've seen it. I've been looking at it, reading about it, looking for it for years, basically. But there was no one who taught it here. And this guy, I said, where did you learn that? And he said, I learned it in Shandong. I was living there for, 5 or 6 years. And like, I said, can you teach me? Like, just like that. And this guy never gave me the time of day before that. In fact, we thought that he thought we were little pricks, and we probably were. And he's like, yep, come tomorrow. And we're like, where at? And he said, come to my house 6 o'clock tomorrow. And we're like, just like that. Next day we just turned up, and that was the beginning. So that was very early 1992.
Wow.
Just a chance thing. I was always on the lookout for it. I met this guy. I saw the skill that he had. Immediately, like, recognized it as like on another level from what I'd seen. And he was willing to teach us, and that was how I got started with Mantis boxing.
And what was his Mantis background? I mean, what kind of Mantis was it?
Well, he's from Hangzhou, but his father was like a his father was a Taiji guy as well. He published a book on young Taiji sword back in the 70s or 80s, and he was like a basketball, he was like I don't know whether it's a professor of physical education or a master of physical education, but he taught in a university in Hangzhou, and so he was an athlete. And when he did his training or went through uni, he had a brother from Shandong, from Qingdao, who was like a friend of his. And when his son Wah, who was my teacher, got into the University of Oceanography in Qingdao, he said like, when you head up there, look for my brother, and this is this guy Chen Tian, and he basically said he'll hook you up when you get there. And he said, because his son was interested in martial arts, that he basically would look after him when he got there. And so he went to university in the early 80s, and this guy sort of hooked him up to do Mantis boxing, but actually initially he started training Plum Blossom Mantis boxing at the university under a guy who was like on the faculty staff, who later on went to be the sort of head of security at the university, who I ended up meeting years later. He trained under him for like the first year or two, and then his uncle, this guy Chen Tian, basically hooked him up with Li Zhangyuan, who's like Li Zhangyuan's like a famous 7-star Mantis master in Qingdao. So he was like, he'd been there since the 1940s. You know, he was one of the big names, you know, in the early 20th centuries in Qingdao, and he basically switched from Meihua and switched into 7-star. Okay. And he trained for about the 5 years while he was going through university. And at that time, Li Zhangyuan was quite old. He was already in his 80s, but he had a famous female disciple who was kind of running things on his behalf, and so he trained not only directly under the master but also under his older sister, this Qingwei Hua, who was quite a well-known, you know, she was known as the best female Mantis boxer, you know, in China throughout the sort of, you know, 1970s and 80s. You know, she used to like win medals all over the place, provincially, nationally, and you know, she was a tough little woman who used to hang with the men, you know. So she also helped coach my teacher.
Did you ever?
And he was there for.
Sorry to interrupt, but did you ever know of a ex-champion here from that first generation from Shandong, a woman by the name of Zhang Yuping?
Zhang Yuping, yeah. So my teacher Li Qiming was her coach on the Shandong team. So I know her. Well, look, I can't say I know her. I met her in 1998 in Beijing when I came. The second year I was there to train like on a sort of long-term basis, and I came to Beijing and I met her there, and she happened to train under one of my teachers, Li Qiming. So and she also had a traditional background as well, but competed in the modern stuff. So
right, yeah. Well, Zhang Yuping, I've known her for years. I mean, I've even had her in South Africa before. I worked directly with her. I mean,
nice. Yeah.
So, but you know, the thing, it's for me. I mean, and again, we're talking a little bit about the legacy of sport wushu, but anyway, might as well say it. For me, the saddest part about it is that these people like her, they trained under people with legitimate traditional knowledge, and they trained hard. They were very, you know, adept at what they did. Like these athletes, like Zhang Yuping was a really well-known athlete here, specifically for Mantis. She won many times as well. But the second they became, they stopped competing, and then she started working for the Chinese Wushu Association, etc. That's it. Training's done. There's no interest. It's finished. You know, and for me, that's that's a stark contrast between like us that do traditional wushu as part of our life, and because we want to do it, and that's the stark contrast between a lot of these athletes that are pushed into it as well. So, you know, so it's
So I mean, it's exactly correct. The thing is, but like with a couple of my teachers, they went the professional route. They started when they were like 6. They did it through their whole life. It's not a particularly good life. No. The aim of most people who have a successful competitive career is to use the guanxi to get a better place of employment and a better lifestyle, and leave wushu like it's a prison. And a lot of these people, their children don't train, they don't train. They can't understand how stupid foreigners could come all the way from the other side of the world to do this stuff for fun. They like that. It entertains them no end, and they feel flattered and they love it. They think we're crazy, but they love us for it. But they really did not enjoy their careers, and most of the people that came through the sports wushu model left it and didn't touch it again, apart from if they entered the administration or it became their career. But the majority of them tried to get out of there. So
totally.
And like most of my teachers, children don't train, which is pretty sad. But and that's the thing, I have a mix of straight traditional, you know, peasant wushu, like masters coaching me, and full professional athletes, as I'm sure you have had as well. And I've also had my current teacher, who's been one of my teachers for as long as I've been going to Shandong. He himself is an ex-professional athlete, and then was a professional coach who coached the electricity and water team back in the days when there were professional teams like the railway, the army, power, and they used to have like a national circuit, and it was sort of big prize money, and it was a big thing. Like, he was a professional coach for years. He's also a graduate from Shanghai Physical Education Institute, and it was his life. However, unlike his older brother, who was one of Zhang Yuping's coaches, he has always loved traditional martial arts and came from a traditional background prior to becoming a competitive athlete. And so once he left that world, he basically dived full head on back into the traditional stuff and has never left it.
Right.
Whereas his older brother, who was a lifelong athlete, who was a member of the Shandong team for many years, was a member of the national team that toured extensively around the world. He performed in over 21 countries.
Wow.
This guy went to prison for his for wushu related stuff, around the Gang of Four period of time. It's a complicated story, but he is still an official, but he's a reluctant official, and he's still known as a wushu person, but he actually doesn't have many fond memories of it at all, to be honest. And he still trains, but he trains in seclusion. He doesn't take any students. You can see that it was a hard life, and he's got a total different outlook on it than his younger brother, who is my current coach.
Well, Yuhai, you mentioned Yuhai earlier, and
Yep.
I was actually planning on going down to Shandong and filming an interview with him. As arguably one of the people that put Mantis's name into modern wushu, one of the people that is outside of China, well known within the Chinese martial arts community because of his roles in the Shaolin Temple, which were iconic roles, great roles, and he was a real Mantis practitioner as well. And I contacted to go talk to him, and I got in contact with his son, and because I don't know if you know much about Yuhai, his fallout with Sport Wushu, and the organization, and he was just
a little.
Yeah, it was mostly because of the reality of the competition format here, and a lot of what goes on behind the scenes, particularly with meddling with results and all sorts of on top of the problems that we spoke about earlier. And he divorced himself from Sport Wushu. He also he said, his son said he does not want to talk about it. He said that he's so distraught and sad about the state and the hopelessness of it that he doesn't want to talk about it. And he just does his own thing with his own traditional Mantis stuff, and he doesn't want to open those old wounds. He's just out of it. And that's very so.
It's a bit of a shame with him too, because in the West particularly, people have this misconception that every praying mantis that comes out of People's Republic is modern wushu, and it's all, if it's not derived from Yuhai, it's influenced by it. It's all just overly fancy. It all focuses entirely on mechanics. There's no use. But even when you look at the Mantis that he created, besides the fact that people don't understand that he actually had a legitimate background, he was one of the later disciples of Lin Jingshan. He also studied a little bit of Plum Blossom. People don't really know that much about that either. Yeah. He was a very accomplished all-round martial artist. Many weapons, various styles of, long fist, traditional styles as well. And, he was a tough, solid, rugged dude, and he was highly respected. And he was actually the captain of the touring teams that went around the world in the 70s. And he was a top dog in Shandong. And he created that routine for a reason. Basically, he had to. And he did what he did, and he was, although I'm not a fan of it, he did it very well. I think he was the only one who really did it very well. I think other people kind of misconstrued it, but you have to acknowledge his brilliance, and especially the background that he came from. But there's a lot of stigma attached to it, and there's also a lot of, both in China and outside of China, as to what is real Mantis, who are real practitioners, what is a real lineage. And all that sort of political stuff is very grating as well. And, there's also a lot of things lay over from the Cultural Revolution of, people blaming each other for who did and didn't desert their masters, who did what service or disservice to their styles. And I'm not surprised that he's withdrawn. I know that he did start to synthesize his own style that was a Mantis boxing based style, but more something a little bit more like Liu He Bafa in recent years. It was something, I can't remember the name of it, but he did for a while with his son run a pretty successful commercial school, and he was involved, but he did fall back, and no one has really heard much from him. But I mean, people were quick to just write him off, but he's very well respected in Shandong, and he did train under a legitimate master, and what he did, but at that time people had to do, he was the top of what he did, and that was the field they were in the competitive martial arts, I say industry, but that was their job, and what he did was probably, had a massive impact. Like you said, he was in Shaolin Temple, and for some people that was their first look at real Tang Lang in Shandong. Not the movements where he was shaking his hands in an over-exaggerated manner, but in the scene where Jet Li looks over the courtyard wall and sees all the monks practicing.
Right.
I think he's got a chain whip and he's hit it up over the top, and he goes up and peeks over the wall. There's a section in there where Yu Hai is playing one of the classical routines of the style, and like at the end he does add his signature shaking, but you can see some actual real Mantis there, and people just overgeneralize and say like it's all bullshit, it's all sport wushu, there's no applications. He was a very and probably still is capable and authentic Mantis boxer. He just happened to create a routine which became massive and a sports wushu thing. So
but
very complicated.
That's an interesting subject, and a lot of people don't seem to understand that him doing that form, and a guy who just learns that form but has no Mantis basis doing that form will not result in the same outcome. And that you could, I mean, again, we're kicking this horse, it's probably mincemeat already. That is the underlying problem. The underlying problem with sport wushu. Chinese martial arts have never come from a place of forms as their foundation. They've come from a foundation before the forms, and everything else is backwards now. So if you're just going to try to do that form or just try learn a style as a form, you're never going to get anything.
No, look, the way I always, it's probably not an original thought, but for me, I think the pyramid has been flipped long ago, and it was prior to modern wushu. It was in the Republic era. It was in Jingwu and the Guoshuguans. They basically, the forms became the primary vehicle for transmitting the styles. I'm doing air quotes, because the drills weren't the kind of things you could teach to large lines and groups of people in massive organizations all throughout the country. The forms was an ideal tool, and so they basically, prior to the advent of modern wushu, people think it was entirely modern wushu, but it was prior to that. It was Jingwu Hui, actually, it was one of the first to do it, and it was basically forms became the focus, and prior to that it wasn't like that at all. They were just the catalog of techniques at the top end of the pyramid, whereas it was the individual movements, the gong, the developing the different kinds of strength, the basics and fundamentals, combinations, and just drilling, and partner work and weapons. And this was the core. The forms was at the very top, but what has happened is it's flipped, and it's been flipped for quite a long time. And so if you're lucky, you're going to learn from a school or a teacher that basically doesn't think that way, because it's certainly not the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you sport wushu, what are you going to do? When you judge on the form becomes, even greater priority. Even with traditional wushu competitions, which I've entered and competed in many times as well, even people that come from traditional backgrounds, when they compete in those competitions, they go in with the same mindset and put the same kind of focus and emphasis on forms training.
Exactly.
To win medals for the glory of their traditional schools, and it's the same kind of thing. So
that's exactly the problem, and it's also it seems to have been the mentality that's been adopted and carried over to the West, and I think that's one of the things that's kind of become, I don't know, maybe you could say in the last 10 years people have kind of identified that and realized, hang on a minute, this doesn't produce results. And because of that, they think, okay, so Chinese martial arts is useless. But, like you said, it's not actually trained like that when it's done correctly. So, Yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to say it too often, because then people will dismiss them altogether, because I don't think they should be done away with. But once you get past basic level, I don't
believe you actually really train forms. I think you practice them to keep them and to maintain them, and if you want to say like work on a particular rhythm or whatever, that might be the focus of that form, but you don't train them in the way you do when you're a beginner, and there should be the lowest priority in your training. You should still maintain them. I believe it's your responsibility if you're going to be true to the art that you're learning, that you should try to do them and do them well, but I don't believe you should be training them in the way that you should be training your basics, your fundamentals, and your attribute training.
Right.
So I mean, and people, you know, and it's like people say it's useless. It's a useless tool. Well, that's because you're trying to use a screwdriver to like tune your car or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like using the tool wrong. Yeah.
I mean, I have the same thing.
That was a really poor analogy.
Yeah, screwdriver, maybe a screwdriver to beat an egg. Maybe that, yeah? So.
Yeah, that's all you can beat an egg with. A screwdriver to conduct brain surgery. Although frontal lobotomies, they used to conduct with a device that wasn't too far off a screwdriver. So that's
correct,
a poor analogy,
and it worked just as well.
Yeah. It did. Look, I always get caught up with this because I don't want to de-emphasize forms to the point where people do away with them, because then I think you're actually stripping the art back and taking just the bits you want, which is fair enough. You can do that if you want, but that's how you like lose arts. So I think they should be maintained. But yeah, it's the degree of emphasis you place on it.
Well, I think,
and how you train them.
You know, I mean, coming from a Xinyi background, so you know how we train. It's 95% skill building and drilling. That's it. I mean,
well, that's it.
So the core of our training is that. But for me, the way I look at forms, and I do maintain them simply because I'm trying to maintain everything that I've learned, is the same way that my teacher maintained them, which is I cycle through them on a regular basis just so I don't forget them, but they're not the focus of my training. But I will say the value that we have with our forms is, apart from combinations and certain rhythms and tempos, my personal experience is that you can also develop and train certain mental intentions through this a particular form and its combinations. So that entire sequence has a specific intention and a state of mind that also gets trained through it. So there is that to it too. But like you said, it's not the focus.
Yeah, there is.
It's not the focus. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some forms teach strategy, and like so, you know, like that's, you know, another sort of, it's related to intent, but it's strategy, and it might not be as complicated or as finessed as it is in internal styles. But in Mantis boxing, you know, every form has a different theme, whether it's like a, you know, dodging and evading, straight line heart attacks, heavy force, springing steps, you know, rotation. And they're usually named after a key technique, but the whole form's not about that technique. But yes, there also are some strategies that are in there, and that's at the high level. So that's true as well. I kind of oversimplified. There are things that you, but not to the level of what I understand of Xingyi, like in terms of intent. Intent with Tang Lang is a little bit more simple. It's just switch on, go forward, like attack. It's actually not very finessey at all. It's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like there's a one common sort of like mental mindset in Mantis boxing, and you know, and that's great. And I find when you look at that, well, in comparison to or against, juxtaposed with like modern combat sports or going up against boxing or Thai boxing, that kind of mindset, which I do love about Mantis boxing, that like head first, go in, brawl, straightforward, you know, like powering in, like blitzing attack is great. It goes well with my mentality. It also has flaws when you meet people that are have great footwork, you know, are counter strikers, you know, you know what I mean? Like it definitely served a purpose at the time when it was at its best, but like some of those things actually can be to its detriment if you try to apply them against the wrong kind of people in the wrong context today. So yeah, you got to be conscious of that kind of stuff as well. There's a lot of flaws with Mantis boxing is probably what I could have said a lot.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Quickly.
Well, you said it. The phrase you used was, I mean, it's something that also I think is misunderstood today. The phrase you used, it served its purpose at the time it was created. And I think if you just scroll through most YouTube videos of Chinese martial arts, there's inevitably one comment that says there, how would this work against a professional UFC fighter? How does this fare
Yep,
get...
yep, yep.
Okay, well, it wasn't made for that. Like, I mean, and that's not an excuse. That's
Yeah.
not an excuse. That's a fact.
No, no.
You know, and
Yep, yep.
you know, it's like they were training method for people that were civilians for the most part, living in a dangerous society, who might run into somebody giving them shit on the street in daily life. It's not somebody who's going to go out and fight a gladiator. You know, a gladiator has a whole different level of skill and development that you've got to now deal with, compared to common Joe that you might fight with, or common Joe with very similar or basic training compared to what you have. So it served its purpose, but we need to compare apples with apples. And that's not to say that these styles have no use, because MMA is an encapsulation. You can put whatever works into that encapsulation. So these styles might have, and definitely do have, aspects that are useful in there, but there's also aspects that won't be useful in that encapsulation. So that's just being...
That's it. You have to be realistic. Like, there's techniques and strategies which you learn them, and you learn them to preserve them and pass them on, because it is a cultural treasure that you're dealing with here. But don't fool yourself. Like, there are some techniques which are absolutely ridiculous, and I actually doubt that they even were very successful then either, because what people try to fool themselves with is that it's just modern wushu that is only concerned with artistic performance or expression. But in fact, a lot of the traditional martial arts, a degree of the forms is also about strutting around like a rooster, puffing up your feathers and showing everybody what a bad man you are, because there is an element of those traditional forms which is also akin to war dance. So, I mean, not a lot of people agree with this, but like, yes, there are real things in there, and there are things hidden in there, but there are also things in there that are entirely there just to look good, or to, you know, show a technical proficiency of that style. And each style, you know, focused on those things to differentiate themselves from other styles. So the core things are all pretty similar, but there are key things in each style which are actually only there to differentiate those styles. And I actually like those things, and I think that they should be preserved and not ignored because they're ridiculous or don't have modern application. They're you know, what do you call them? A historical artifact, I suppose. And as long as you know what they are, and you know what they were for. Like, for example, there's certain ways of stepping which were originally for kicking up dust. And yes, if you're retreating and running away from somebody in a dirty gravel field, you might be able to flick dust in their eye. But also, that kicking up dust is an impressive looking thing that is basically mimicking the scratching of a rooster, which is like a super macho display. So there is that element, and it wasn't all that artistic and showy business didn't just come about with the advent of modern wushu.
No, for sure. And what you just mentioned as well, it varies, and that's the other thing. We try to paint Chinese martial arts with one brush, but it's such a broad, it's such a wide-ranging field. There's so many styles, so many different areas, so many different principles, methodologies, ideas, concepts across the styles, that some styles you can honestly say are mostly performative, but that doesn't mean other styles are also performative, or some styles are heavily influenced by ceremony, therefore they're all ceremonial. No, if you compare, and again, if I'm going to go back to this analogy, if you compare Xingyi to Cha Chuan, the amount of, let's say, performance value is totally different between the two, and the value that the emphasis that they put on those two things is also totally different between Xingyi and Cha Chuan, and then Cha Chuan and Hungar, and Hungar and something else. It's totally different. There is a reason why Hungar demonstrations are heavily combined with line dancing, because that's just what people did. I mean, those things went together. A lot of the performances of line dancing were done by Hungar people, and Hungar people did performances. They got paid to perform. So, you know, it's not going to be the same, though, with Baiyu and Tongbei. I mean, no one's paying people to do Baiyu and Tongbei, you know. That's why most of the time they're just thinking about how to smash somebody's head in. But, you know...
Exactly.
It's
too, I mean, there's so many styles, there's so many, like, people don't understand China's not this homogenous thing either. Like, every province has so much diversity and its own, you know, it's its own microcosm. And then when you're talking about the size of China, the number of ethnicities, the number of dialects, the regional variation, and then you've got styles that are split, physically distant, so they develop individual characteristics that don't spring up in another place, and then you add in the few thousand years of wushu isn't that we have today is not a few thousand years old, but if you add in the long term of history on top of that, like there is just so much variation. You can't really speak for the whole of Chinese martial arts. It's impossible.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard enough to even specialize in one city, in one province, and get across all the martial arts there. It's Mantis boxing, for example. People think, Shandong is the cradle, but man, it's every city, and every city has representatives of the main branches, and then each master and their descendants have their own interpretation, and then you've got there's just endless variety. It's just unbelievable. You just can't really speak for all of it accurately.
All right, so maybe that's a good segue to get back into your story and how you ended up in China from this background in Australia.
So I started training with Hua in 92, early 92, and 94 I went to university, and I was initially going to do zoology, and but I was already heavily into training, training several hours every single day, and then I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to do Asian studies so I can hurry up, learn Chinese, go to China and train. So I changed my degree, and I used zoology as my external major, but I ended up doing a Asian Studies Bachelor of Mandarin at ANU, and so I started that while I was training with Hua, and in 94 he went home to China to get married. Excuse me. Okay. So I went to China for the first time in 1994, and primarily to go to his wedding, but also to go to the Shaolin Temple. So I was with my future wife, and so I went there and we attended the wedding, and I trained with his father, and then we did the trek up, via rail all the way up to the temple, and I was actually going there to look for descendants of my teacher's teacher, because he actually went to the temple in the early 80s and became a consultant for the temple, and was one of the people that brought Shandong Mantis boxing into the temple, despite the fact that there is a lot of bullshit Mantis there that was completely made up, this kind of modern mimic style. There actually was some legitimate Tang Lang that was brought into the temple, because they always thought there was some connection between Shaolin and, however tenuous, and Mantis boxing. So they wanted to have it there, and they brought him in, and he actually was a brother of Sushi, who was the abbot or vice abbot at the time. Yeah, the abbot. And they were quite close, and he made many trips. This is Li Jiangyuan. He made many trips to the temple, accompanied by Qingwei Hua, who was this lady who also coached my teacher. And he taught a lot of his material there. And so there were people that studied under him, and I was aware of that. So I was going to go up there and try and find them while I was there. I didn't have much time. It was a pretty ridiculous mission. I did actually meet some people who knew him and trained under one of his students who became actually a disciple of his. Okay. But, I was only there for a few days. It was pretty frivolous. But anyway, I already had the bug, was going to come back. I trained with Hua for about 5 years, and then he basically said to me, I've taught you as much as I learned, and it's probably a good idea that you go and train under my teacher. And what happened with him was he came out here to do his PhD in the late 80s at James Cook University in North Queensland, and then in 89 a certain event happened, which meant that
a certain event. Yeah.
And I don't know, a certain event. I mean, I don't know what kind of coverage these podcasts get, so you know what I'm talking about. But anyway,
I still live here,
basically. Yeah, that's it. And so basically a lot of the Chinese students that were in Australia at the time were given the option to stay, and he chose to stay. And hence him coming to Canberra and me meeting him. But at that period of time, he lost contact with his master, and he lost contact with his sister. So he'd written a few letters, but was unaware that in the period since that Li Jiangyuan had actually passed away. Wow. But he wrote this letter of introduction for me and said, take this, go to Qingdao, look for my master. He wrote this pretty cool letter saying, here's my idiot student, can you please teach him? It's your boy Hua. This is how ridiculous it was. I basically took off. I didn't do the year in China program at university. I rushed through my degree as fast as I could, with the sole intention of going to Shandong to study Mantis boxing.
Right.
And I took my future wife, and we took off, and I took this letter of introduction, and I basically just turned up in Qingdao. I had a contact at the university where he went to school, and and I set about trying to find this master who I pretty quickly found out had died. So and my teacher was unaware of that, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting people knew what I was there for, and this is like 1996, 97, and it was a strange thing, this Aussie boy turning up here looking to study under Mantis boxing masters, and he'd come with this letter of introduction, and all of a sudden all of these masters wanted to have a piece of me. And his first teacher at the university, who was a Taiji Tang Lang master, he basically brought in another big name master from the Shandong countryside down to Qingdao and said, you got to study with this guy. And I was like, look, I'm actually looking for so-and-so. And they're like, oh, forget about them. Forget about Seven Star. Seven Star's dead in Qingdao. It's gone. When he died, it's over. There's none of his disciples left, none of his students. It's gone. Forget about it. Come with us, join us. And basically gave me an ultimatum that I had to make a decision within 24 hours to leave Qingdao and go up into this country town to live with this guy full-time for 6 months to train. And
that was Taiji Mantis.
And the master, it was. Yeah, the guy who I'm talking about is Taiji and Taiji Meihua. But
right.
Long story short, I wasn't keen on that, and they tried to put a bit of pressure on us, like in terms of not just university security, but it wasn't PSB, it was police, but like non-uniform police, came and basically put an ultimatum to us and came to our the dorm we were staying in, and like we were basically trying to take our passports, and it was some sort of heavy shit. You basically trying to put it on us, like, you're going to do it, otherwise you're going to go. And they said, if you don't accept the offer, you're going to have to leave Qingdao. You're going to be kicked out of the university, and you're going to basically be booted out of Qingdao. And like they trying to take advantage of the fact that they knew that we didn't really have any connections there. My Chinese was quite rudimentary at the time. There were not many foreigners at that time. In the in the 90s, there was a couple of like Arabs, a Jordanian guy, an African guy, a Croatian bird. That was about it. And and then I had this Chen Sao Tian. I had his contact number, and he's the guy that originally hooked Hua up when he was in Qingdao. And he said, look, if you get in any trouble, call this number. And I got assistance to call him, and then I told him what was going on, and he said, let me sort it out. And he spoke to Li Qiming, who is the older brother of Li Qiyu, who's my teacher now. And he's the guy who was the best mates with Yu Hai. They were teammates in the Shandong team. They toured around the world together. He's like a big man in Qingdao. He's like #1 Wushu guy. Studied under Zhou Yongfu. He's got a traditional background, but he's the one who was a lifetime professional. And he basically got in touch with one of the senior disciples of Li Zhangyuan, who was my first teacher in Qingdao, is Kang Zhiqiang. So he organized, they basically called me and said, come tomorrow to this place, and I turned up, and and the 24-hour deadline had passed, but I left anyway, and we took our stuff and took the passports out and hid them and got out of there so that they couldn't come and take our stuff while we were out of the dorm. And I turned up to this place, and because they were trying to put it on us. I mean, I don't know how there's a lot of bluffing going on as well, but also I didn't have much of a leg to stand on. They could have made it pretty difficult for us. So but just the timing was good. And then I met Kang, and he basically did an on-the-spot examination of me, and basically made me run through every single thing that I'd studied in the past 5 years, like right all the way through my stretching, my kicking, stances, combinations, like drilling, every single form multiple times, and like just basically at the end said, yeah, you're pretty shit, but I'll teach you. So, it was like, he just basically said wrong, all wrong. But I think I can teach you. So, and I was really trying my hardest, because this was my big chance. This guy was going to possibly become my teacher, and I also had this thing breathing down my neck that that were trying to force me to go off and train with this other. Shandong is a bit Wild West to some extent, or Wild East, and there's always a kind of little bit of gangsterism on the periphery, if not like overtly in the martial world. So this kind of thing is not uncommon, and it was especially more common back then. You know, just kind of, you know, people trying to stand over and all that kind of business. So yeah, it was a legitimate thing that was going on, but it was just fortuitous that I ended up getting in touch with him, and you know, I handed him the letter. Sorry, I should say, I handed him the letter before that, and he read the letter, and he actually had tears in his eyes because Wa's letter was pretty respectful and touching to his old master that he hadn't seen for years. You know, and it was full of good wishes and, you know, asking him very politely to take my student. You know, he's a respectful boy and like he will do his best. And, you know, like it was a really good, well-written letter, and Kang got emotional. And I think the reason, I know the only reason he agreed to teach me was because of this letter.
Sure.
And because of my teacher's relationship with his teacher. They both trained under the same master, and out of a sense of duty, he took me on. So very lucky.
Yeah. You know, people don't also understand that aspect of things in the West and how important an introduction is and how much it means. And you don't just arrive usually at a teacher's doorstep without anything and just say, hi, I'm here to train. And particularly with the traditional Chinese martial arts and how important that is. I mean, and also a lot of people don't realize in the West particularly that the person making the recommendation is putting himself at risk. And how important it is.
For sure.
I mean, it's a risk he takes, and if you fuck up or if you do anything wrong, it's on him, you know? And
yeah, of course.
That's why people think, hey, you know, I've had it numerous times when people are like, hey, can you take me through to your teacher? I'm like, I know nothing about you. I know nothing about you.
It doesn't work that way.
I'm not going to take you through, you know? I mean, if I don't know anything about you. So, yeah.
I mean, also, that's exactly correct. You know, he even didn't teach. He wasn't teaching. He'd only taught one person ever, and he had basically withdrawn himself completely from the kind of organized wushu world. Basically, he was still involved in sort of administration to a very minimal extent, and he was a judge and things like that. But by the time I came there, he was well and truly not involved. Didn't want any involvement in it. Wasn't teaching. Had several pretty hefty accidents, including a big, you know, truck or bus accident where he almost broke his back and,
Jesus.
You know, got brain damage. And you know, like he was a big drinker. He was out of shape. This is a guy who used to be built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was like a very powerfully built guy. I'll flick you some photos later on. Right. Like he was a super athlete. He was known as a like a he-man. He was a strong man. And he was way past that. He still did a bit of training, but in the way that people who only train because they sort of feel the obligation to train. Right. But he was kind of, to be honest, not pushed into it, but encouraged very strongly by Li Qiming to take me on, and also because of that letter. But he wasn't he wasn't a born teacher. Let me put it that way. And he often didn't hide his reluctance. He didn't hide his. He'd get pissed off pretty easily, pretty frequently, and it was a pain in the ass and it was obvious. So if I did fuck up and make too many mistakes and not take it seriously, although I always did take it seriously, but if he thought I wasn't, if I made the same mistake multiple times, he would just lose his mind, and you know, he'd smack me in the mouth and like just tell me to fuck off, don't come back, don't bother calling me again. And he sent me home so many times and said, you're done, we're finished, you're wasting my time, this was a stupid idea right from the beginning. Like losing his mind with veins popping out of the side of his head. I tell people this stuff, I feel bad saying this because it sounds like I'm smearing his character, but this was his character.
Yeah, this is your history. I mean, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, and you know, he did some things which were not in probably Western thought good things, but I didn't mind and I understood. But you know, like one time in front of my wife, he basically just like punched me straight full force in the mouth, and while my hands were down, because I had pissed him off, and that was the end of the class. And I took it. My head snapped back and instantly bleeding, and you know, I looked at him with my eyebrows raised. Like I did want to hit him back. I mean, you know, you would have had that
initial thought,
dilemma many times in China where you, I'm going to belt this, but like, you know, I said, okay, cool, you want to do that, like, but you know, I understood. Like I just pushed him to his limit sometimes, and my Chinese was shit, and sometimes I didn't understand a concept fully or correctly, or I just couldn't get a movement right, and he'd try and explain it so many times, and he'd lose his patience. And this wasn't a joke to him. He was teaching me for a serious matter. It was a family legacy, and from day one, it was serious business. And sometimes he would do things which people from maybe a Western or a modern or a non-traditional martial arts perspective would think were warped or wrong or violent or whatever, but I understood it. And I'm not saying I stood there and let him treat me like a punching bag, but sometimes that did happen. But you know, it happened far less as we got along.
Sure.
As we went along, like I went back and forth there maybe 20 times. You know, I'd go there multiple times a year. We spent a lot of time together. He became my second dad, and you know, he loved me like a son. I'm not afraid to say it. I loved him like a second dad. You can't love anyone more than your own dad, but he became my adoptive father. And, you know, we went through bad times, and he did some stuff which was pretty full on, but I did too. And it's pretty funny when I look back on it. Other people think it sounds bizarre and why would you let someone do that to you? But, you know, the things that I got from him, the gems that I learned, and the things that I was able to make myself do via his teachings, made it all worth it. I didn't care anything about getting smacked in the face or hit over the head with sticks, or, you know, his favorite thing was like picking you up and dropping you full force onto the ground, like head first onto either concrete or dirt. He loved that, you know, like, you know, the obligatory Chinese smacking the balls. Every single technique he's showing you has to either start or end with this, you know, being smashed in the balls, and it was never pulled. It was always full force. Yeah. And, you know, and I think I went through a period of doing things like that with my students too. I no longer do, but I also kind of think that's kind of like a teacher's, like, it sounds a bit crude, but, you know, it's like kind of their right. They got to get their enjoyment out of it too, if that means smacking you around a little bit. But yeah, he was a good dude. I'm making him sound really bad, but he was actually a good guy, and just very rough, very coarse, and but he found communicating difficult, and explosive temper. He also had a couple of major head injuries, including one where he was actually partially scalped being hit in the head with a broadsword during the Cultural Revolution, because in those days when the different groups of Red Guards used to fight each other, they'd fight each other, as you know, with like clubs and long knives and machetes, and because guns were really hard to get hold of, and in Shandong, the Red Guards, it was basically gangster factionalism, so yeah, there was a lot of
like that in
straight
most
up
places.
People fighting each other. Yeah, sure. So, rough dude, but he was a rough diamond, so... Yeah.
You know, I mean...
we shouldn't have said half that stuff.
Nah. You know, at the end of the day, like, people have this modern understanding of Chinese martial arts and martial arts in general as these, you know, these sages, all-knowing, all-wise, totally calm, all benevolent, and not a single flaw when, like, you know... Sometimes I tell people, if you understand real Chinese martial arts, and like, if you come in here and you hang around with the traditional circles for long enough, you understand the four pillars of Chinese martial arts are swearing, fighting,
drinking, smoking,
cursing, and drinking. You know, that's it. Well, I said swearing and cursing. I'll let you think about the fourth F. It begins with an F, and I'll leave it there. So, you know, that's... And that's...
Well, the problem is, like, you can continue, sorry.
Yeah, no, carry on. I got the message out. People...
Look, I think people kind of sort of like, I don't know if it's orientalizing or whatever, and there's this kind of stereotype of the inscrutable Chinese, and then, like, the problem is a lot of people that came up under that Chinatown Kung Fu model is that a lot of those masters kind of marketed themselves that way, and a lot of that was, you know, because of things like, you know, the Shaw Brothers movies and stuff like that. And I love those movies too, but, you know, the you know, honorable, you know, wise, kind master. Look, I haven't met any of them. Like, they just don't exist. It's not... You're talking about people who mainly, if they didn't train it because they were forced to, which almost all of my teachers were, from a very young age, basically given to a teacher when they were 6 or 7 and saying, here he is, and they would dread going every day. They are people that pursued it because they were rough and they liked to fight. And they usually ended up kind of cultivating the other aspects and becoming maybe a little bit more cultured, possibly, some of them, because of their training and their long-term involvement. But at the base of it, they're the rough people. They're the people that don't mind getting down. They want to fight. They want to use it for that. They want to understand what it is for that. And also, China's got a very big macho culture as it is, but I can't speak for Hebei province, but Shandong is definitely still very much got the water margin flowing through the veins. People there are still, there's that and the sort of the jungle sort of this kind of like the underworld sort of, it permeates the martial world as well, and there's that definitely. Real it's not a scene for the faint-hearted, and people talk about wude all the time in the West, and you don't have martial virtue, and that's just some bullshit. Wude in the beginning was really just a code for killers, basically, that would mean that they wouldn't rip each other off and kill each other, almost like a mafia code. Yeah. Like, it's just been romanticized too much, and and I pity the people that do go there and expect to get something and then come away disappointed because and in my opinion, if you don't meet these people and experience this side of it, you kind of missed out anyway. So I do understand that I was very lucky, and it was definitely due to the personal connection. And I was referred, and like you said, it was a big risk for my teacher to do that, and it was a serious thing for him to do that, and it was a serious thing for them to accept me, and I took it seriously, and I dedicated myself to it with all that I had. So, yeah, it's definitely not the world that you might think if you've come from outside. Like, people do have the wrong idea, I think.
Totally. I mean, like my teacher used to tell me stories about his teacher, Zhao Zhong, his Xingyi teacher, who was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. Yeah. He had memorized everything, and that's how it was. Who had come from, I mean, you're talking about people that were born in the Qing dynasty, at the end of the Qing dynasty, Things were falling apart. They were martial artists, and that's how they earned their living, They're not going to be these soft, oh, hi, how are you doing? Oh, you're sorry. Oh, you didn't mean that. Oh, let's let it go. They're going to be people that'll, knock the teeth out of your mouth in, like, he told me stories about his teacher just getting angry while sitting at a table while they're eating, hitting the table and breaking the table, and and then just carrying on and eating. So it's a different world. It's a different generation too. So, yeah.
It is, and these guys. My teacher died quite young at 53, and he was born in around I think 1949 or so. So he's not really even very old generation, but he's like firmly through the cultural revolution generation, etc. But he started quite young. But he, I saw him fight, like full-on fights, like on the street, in restaurants, like I'm talking about against people 10 years younger than him, like full headbutting, smashing up into windows. We were in this Wuguan out in the mountains, sort of central Shandong, with my wife again, and my two teachers, and visiting masters there. And during the dinner, this young guy got a bit cheeky a few too many times to my teacher, and his wife said something smart, and he kind of said something along the lines of, "Are you going to control your missus?" And then the guy stood up, and he was a young guy, a pretty solid guy, Bagua guy, and he's like, "You want to say one more thing about me or my missus, I'm going to knock your head off." And he said, I'll take you outside and smash you like I used to smash your old man. That's what my teacher said to him, because apparently they used to fight when they were younger. And, and he flogged his old man a few times. And then this young dude sort of kind of launched across the table, very small room, and the table took up most of the room. And the first thing my teacher did was stand up, flip the table over into him, and ran him up against the wall, grabbed him by the head, and started diving into him, headbutting him and kneeing him in the balls. And we all just stood up like, what the fuck? Like, this dude was like, 50 at the time. And but I was loving it. I was like, yeah. And I looked to my big teacher, Li Qiming. I was like, "Whoa, is this all right?" And he was like, just like gave me the signal, like, keep your mouth shut, step back, because I wanted to jump in, because my instinct is, that's my teacher, that's my family. Fucking, this guy's younger, and he was probably still 10 years older than me, but I wanted to jump in and but he was handling it well enough anyway, put it that way. But my big teacher, Li Qiming, wouldn't allow it. Basically pushed me off to the side and said, "Leave it, let them fight." And they fought inside this room. They knocked the furniture everywhere, everything was smashed, and then he stood in the middle and separated them and took them outside into like this courtyard outside the restaurant, and like made us all basically stand in there, and he just made them go. He stood between them and he goes, "Stop!" Basically he gave the signal, and like they just went at it. They were out there fighting for about 10 minutes. You're talking about a 50-year-old man, and then like he came back in. all his shirt all ripped up, bleeding, and black eye, and they were both smashed up. But the other guy was smashed up more. And I was like, that was the best thing I could have seen. Like, I got to see him in action. I mean, I saw him slap people here and there, or, people would get rude in a restaurant. He'd grab them by the wrist and pull them across the table. Or I saw him sort of do single things here and there, but that was the first time I saw him, the only time I saw him have a full-on proper, like a, a bout.
Yeah.
But we weren't allowed to go out and watch him outside, because I think they were kind of, there's always that little bit, kind of save a bit of face.
Right,
They really want us to see him getting down and dirty. But they were all friends in the morning. They came into breakfast, and the punishment, they had to both drink a full big tumbler glass of baijiu each. At like
the usual
shake hands.
The usual punishment.
Yeah. And shake hands and give each other a slap on the back, and it was all good, and it was amazing. Like, and again, people would hear that and say, "Who are these animals? This is not good." You know what I mean? Like,
Martial artists don't drink
like,
alcohol. Really?
Yeah. Oh, and they don't brawl either.
Yeah,
they don't brawling. Like, that's the thing. To me, Tang Lang is a brawling style, and I mean. It is, and like there are some finessey movements in there, but really I was trying to say this in those clips that I did with Will, but I am now, I just rambled and I missed the key. I tried to sort of say that, yeah, it's all about context, but some of the key things that people emphasize the most in Mantis boxing, because they focus so much on the forms, are these signature movements, but they only occur at one point in the fight, and that's that initial part where the fight kicks off. Beyond that, it's a punching, kicking, elbowing, kneeing, scrambling brawl. And that's how all martial arts in China, when they fight, actually go down. Right. And people don't realize that China is a country where people brawl on the streets, in restaurants, in queues, at the train station, all the time. It's just, and people fight, and everybody fights, and no one backs down, and women fight, and old people fight. Everybody has a go, and there's a long history of brawling. And it doesn't matter how finessey these styles are, often when they're applied, it's a brawl, like once you get past that initial contact point. So, yeah, I tried to get that across, but I don't think I did it very effectively.
No, that came across quite well. So, I mean, I think everybody listening understood. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. People have the wrong understanding of the society, the Wulin, like what people are like inside. I mean, my teacher used to tell me, even like you were talking about your teacher hitting you, and during training and. My teacher told me, and I won't mention which older generation Bagua person it is, because it's going to annoy some people, but it's just it's a system of Bagua that in the last, 15 years has suddenly come out as being, I'm this Bagua lineage's person, but this only occurred after that guy is dead, so I won't name him, but he was telling me about why this guy had so few students, and he'd be like, he didn't have anybody that absorbed everything because no one lasted with him. He broke all his students.
Yep.
I mean, literally, Lao Shi, 这个 teacher, how do we use this? And he said, you don't understand. Come here. Arm broken. You understand now? Yeah. If you don't understand, come again. And they wouldn't come back. A lot of people would just disappear.
No.
So, and that's the extreme level of it. But that's more common than people think. I mean, that was pretty common.
Yeah. I mean, within the last two generations, like even actually within living memory, there's Tang Lang masters who've killed their students, and there's been a couple who were famous for having really great high level skills, but they passed it on to no one for exactly that reason. They were just such bad people that were just too hard. They injured their students too frequently. Yeah. They tried out their movements at full power, and really, really injured people badly. And on top of that, were just bad-tempered people. You know what I mean? There's a couple in particular. I won't name them either, but yeah. And it wasn't that long ago. You're talking right up to the Republic period. And actually, one of these masters only died in the 1960s. So yeah. I mean, and that must have been common across, I'd say, a lot of northern China and eastern China. So, yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. Like, I've actually had older generation masters in their 80s tell me stories of their teachers walking around basically the whole day, ready to and I used to do this when I was younger too. When I used to go out and fight alone in the clubs and stuff, I'd have a movement preset ready to go. Okay, tonight I'm going to try and knock someone out with a winding elbow across the jaw. I'd have it preset there ready to go, so I didn't have to load it or think of it. I'd think, okay, tonight I'm going to work a clinch with knees, and these masters used to do that in the street and walk around actively preparing to kill anybody who would dare step to them, basically, because in those days, as you said, it was something serious, and these people would kill if they had to. Yeah. And they were, some of them were thugs, some of them were killers, some of them were gangsters, some of them were religious people, some of them were just crazy drunks. There were all different kinds of people, but those really high-level masters, some of them were quite unhinged, and they were basically prepared to kill at any time, and some of them did, and some of them ended up in prison, and a lot of them died also being killed in retribution for killings that they had done. In fact, several big-name Mantis boxing masters, including one of the founders, was actually killed that way as well. Yeah. And a lot of them worked as caravan guards too, so they killed people quite often, and they often got killed in the process as well. So not the lovely, fluffy, honorable, Yodas that people think of.
Well, Yoda's awesome in his own right, but we should realize it's fiction. Anyway. Anyway, but I heard that while you were in Shandong, you competed a few times in some Sanda matches and things like that.
Well, I competed here, but over there I competed properly once, and it was a very strange event because it wasn't modern sports Sanda. It was traditional Mantis boxing free fighting, apparently. Okay. And so what they tried to do in 1999 was that because in Qingdao, basically the Qingdao Wushu Association, they're all Mantis people. And that competition that they have every year is an international competition there that draws people from all around the world, are mainly Mantis people that come there. And the key events are Mantis. So they wanted to do a Mantis-specific Sanda, and they invented their own rule set, and they invented dodgy protective equipment, which was basically a boxing headgear, which only covered the temples, the ears, and the front of the forehead, and they stitched in what was a modified baseball catcher's face cage. So they cut it with a welder, and it was three wires across, and they basically stitched it onto the front of this mask, and then they wound some form of cloth around it. Apparently, the idea of winding the cloth around it was to increase the thickness of the bars so that it would prevent the fingers going into the eyes, and also to protect you from cutting yourself on it, which is ridiculous because we were wearing gloves. But the gloves that we wore basically were soccer goalkeeper gloves. So they're about 3 mils thick. Yeah. And the whole logic behind that was, I applaud their effort in trying to sort of keep it real, and they were trying to grapple with how do we show Mantis boxing in full combat safely, and they were trying, and it was a new thing. And so the idea was they'd have open finger gloves so that you could swipe the eyes, slash the eyes, finger poke the eyes, grab the nuts, and the idea was you could do all of those things. And the idea behind that was then we had the eyes protected, so you could still go at the eyes, but you wouldn't actually get them,
you wouldn't
which
damage
to me
them.
Cancels it out and makes it pointless, because you're going to flash at their eye with your fingers, and then it's not going to do any damage, and at the same time you're going to get like a hook punch in the side of your head and knocked out. So so you were able to hit the balls, you were able to elbow, knee, throw. You couldn't strike the back of the head. There was a rule, and I'm sure because I checked several times that I didn't have this wrong, but we got a briefing before the fight the day before, and they basically said if the opponent goes to the ground and tries to attack off the ground, so like using D-tongue techniques or whatever, or trying to sweep you off the floor, you're allowed to kick or stomp on the grounded opponent up to 4 times. Wow. I was like, sweet, that's a perfect rule. I like that. And so very, very minimal thin chest protector, like the old style sports Sanda one, which has got the bamboo slats inside it. And
which is it's good for show. And, those old ones with the bamboo slats, it's good for show.
Well, as you know, they protect you not at all.
Exactly.
In fact, they often, it fractures and the thing ends up going into you. And people have actually had their lungs pierced before. So, So and it was supposed to be it was meant to be like legitimately drawn from weight categories. you would pull a paper out of the bucket, and then you find out who your opponent is. And it was meant to be random mix of Chinese versus foreigners, but of course that wasn't what happened. They ended up being China versus the world. So we had like America versus China, Italy versus China, Australia versus China, and that was it. I think 3 Americans, 1 Italian, and me, and so they were title bouts. And like for example, the guy I fought, it was the only other guy who was around my size, and he came to my training in the week in the lead up, held pads for me, watched me train for 3 hours every day, and like I was like, he was introduced to me as a brother. We come from the same family, and we better not be fighting each other. No, we're not going to put you together.
Okay.
Like it's all good.
They ran a number on you. They ran a number on you.
Fighting me. Yeah. So he came to training. He didn't just come to hold pads for me. He watched me every day for 3 hours a day in the week, in the lead up. He questioned me on what my favorite techniques were. We exchanged, so it was a big stitch up. We got there on the day. They had the draw already done. We didn't get to do the draw. You're fighting so-and-so. I'm like, oh, surprise. Like, I felt like a sucker, but yeah, that's how it was. And it turned out to China versus the rest of the world. And it was an extremely heated affair because, as you can imagine, China don't ever like to lose to foreigners. And, really wildly interpreted rules and very badly mismatched fights. The face cages were ridiculous. As soon as you punch straight into the face, the eye cage collapsed your nose, shattered your nose, cut their faces to pieces. So all these poor dudes, and there was a lot of guys who fought who never actually fought before. Got their noses and cheekbones shattered, and most of the Chinese guys were quite good and were sports Sanda guys, bar one guy. And they try to make it so that before you fought, you had to do an examination. You had to demonstrate a traditional Mantis boxing form in front of a panel of masters, and you had to do it well. And that was the way that you would verify that you were actually a Mantis boxer. Yeah, so like two of the guys out of the 5 new Mantis boxing, the other guys did like the equivalent of like a Wu Chan, but a Mantis boxing style, forgot movements halfway through, couldn't finish it. It was obvious they weren't, they were Sanda guys, but there was a couple of legit guys. Yeah, so it was crazy. It was just like, and I got suckered again because before we went out there, it was like, brother, we're brothers. Let's just take it easy out there.
Of course.
We're friends, like take it easy, shake hands. And as soon as we went out there, this dude tried to take my head off, and it just turned into a full brawl. And because the gloves were so thin, it was basically just bare knuckle fighting. The only thing the gloves did was prevent you from cutting your hands on the face cage. But pretty wild. And he was trying to kill me, and so I started to give it back that way too, and it became a real fight. The crowd were very they really wanted them to smash us, you know what I mean? And in the first round, towards the end of the first round, he kept running from me, and so I made the mistake of just chasing him around like an idiot, like legitimately, like running, like actually running away from me, and then so he went down. I hit his foot, and he sort of fell back, and as he fell, anyone that falls in front of me when I'm fighting, he's going to get kicked in the head, and I just had a flash in my mind, hey, we're allowed to do this, so I actually soccer kicked him across his face, his neck, and his chest, like a pretty big solid kick, and I slid him out of the bounds, kicked him out of the bounds, and the crowd just whoa, money, they were like, kill this foreigner, and they started they were really pissed off, and I was like, what, it's allowed.
Yeah, if it was the other way around, he would have kicked you. If it was the other way.
Well, the thing was, because he stumbled back, he went to sort of not up kick me, but he went to sort of kick my leg. And in my understanding, if they try to attack off the ground, you could do that. So, I did this and I booted him, and then he got up and he carried on a bit, and he was a bit upset about it. So I said, look, I'm sorry. I thought I was allowed to do that, and it's pretty hard to apologize in the heat of the moment. So we went and we fought another round, and it was the crowd was really wanting him to kill me, and very brawly. I basically smashed him the whole second round as well, and then we went off and came back in for the third round and squared up to go back on, and the referee, the corner judges didn't hold up the flags. How they got the black flag, red flag, and the middle. It was really every time I grabbed him in the clinch and got control during the fight, he would immediately step in and break us apart. He didn't want me getting any control of him, and this guy's whole strategy was to throw haymakers and charge forward and try and get me in a body lock and push me out. That's all he could do, trying to push me out. And it wasn't a late tie; it was taped. So, the floor was a stupid-looking carpet in a hotel. It was masking tape. It was quite a big ring. It was like 8 by 8. Yeah. You couldn't see the edge, and because of this dumbass mask, you had your head down. It was really hard to see, and, made for a very sloppy affair. And we came out for the third round, and I squared up to go back in, and he sort of looked at the ref, and the ref looked at the corner judges, and then they didn't put any flags up or whatever between the rounds. And then I stepped forward, and then the ref jumped in between and then said, "Nah, fight's off," waved it off. And then I was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, you lost 2 rounds." And I was, because in Sanda, you win the 2, you don't go to the third. Yeah, and I said, "How did I lose the 2 rounds?" Like, they had at the end of the round given me the round on the second round, and then they had not indicated before the third round to call the round off. He called it off himself. One of the corner judges told him something, and then he said, "Oh, you lost both rounds." And I was like, "No, I didn't lose the second round." And the only reason I would have lost the first round was because of a point deduction for the kick, which I had argued was legal anyway. But then he goes, no, you didn't lose, you're disqualified. And I said, "What am I disqualified for?" And he said, "You're disqualified for kicking him in the head on the ground in the first round." I was like, "What, you're retrospectively disqualifying me for something that happened in my broken Chinese?" And it was pointless. I didn't want to be a bad sport. Stand there arguing. The decision is the decision. I should have fought better, but it was ridiculous. And but the crowd loved it, and it was a pretty wild fight. And he was smashed up, and I was fine. I didn't have no injuries or whatever. I was a bit pissed off. I flew all the way from Australia specifically. I wasn't going to compete in '99, but my teacher said, "You got to come. We're doing this year. It's the first traditional Tang Lang Sanda. You can become, if you win their bare hand weapons and the Sanda, you get, Tang Lang Wang, you can win this like belt." And I was like, "All right, man, I've got to come." He's like, you have to come. And I was pumped. And I didn't train for it. I just turned up 2 weeks notice, and then all that stuff happened. And I was a bit pissed off. But it was a cool thing to be a part of. It was pretty interesting. It was a failure. There were so many really bad injuries, like especially facial injuries. And one of the Americans was quite, ended up in hospital. A few of the Chinese fighters had their teeth knocked out because they didn't wear mouth guards, including one of my training brothers, Italian guy, really cool dude, and Antonello Casarella. He sidekicked my training brother in the mouth and right at the start, and just knocked his front tooth right out of his head. And they were laughing at us before the fight because we were wearing mouth guards, and like, "What do you need that for?" And like they all got their teeth through their lips, but it was actually the lesser experienced foreign fighters who got really banged up, and a couple ended up in hospital. And there was a little bit of talk about people sort of trying to seek damages, and that was the first and last traditional Tang Lang Sanda bout competition in Qingdao. They never had it again. They banned it. And and the following that year, in the push hands comp, another friend of mine from Germany launched one of the Chinese athletes backwards, and he smashed his head on the ground, and the guy actually went into a coma and died.
Oh shit!
So it was actually a pretty dodgy event in terms of, like, I think they really realized, we've got to be careful about this. It was cool. Props for them for trying, and I like the idea behind it, but it was poorly thought out, and it was, another example of traditional people who don't really understand combat sports, kind of trying to make something, and not a single eye poke or nut shot was seen that day. That's the thing. They went to all the trouble with that stupid gear, which enhanced the injuries, and not one person, because as you know, when you get in a brawl and you're fighting, at range with a known opponent standing in front of you, it's punching and kicking until you can get to clinch range. And all those movements of like suddenly poking someone in the eye, or, grabbing someone and, locking their arm and then kneeing in the face, that happens in a self-defense situation, or, the first moment of a brawl, but it doesn't happen when two people square off. And so people were surprised that it was a brawl. And like, people have seen footage of my fight. There's only a little bit of it because I didn't get footage of the whole rounds, and I actually never wanted to post it because it was pretty disgusting, if you ask me. I look back on it with a lot of embarrassment. It was a horrible performance, but they say it's just brawling. What's that? Where's the Mantis boxing? I'm like, man, I'm a Mantis boxer. I was fucking Mantis boxing. You know what I mean? Like, what do people expect? Well, you fight, and that was a real fight. That was why I don't regret it, because we actually just went out there and punched on. It was a real fight,
Sure.
and it was a good experience. And you know, I came out of it all right. And one of my teachers came up to me, Qiming, after, and he said, you know what? None of my students ever lose anything. And he goes, whether you were disqualified or lost, he goes, technically you shouldn't be able to call yourself my student after your performance. And he said, but what you did, and he said, including kicking that guy in the face on the ground and the way you fought, he goes, you're definitely my student, and I'm proud of the way that you fought. And he said, basically, fuck it, you didn't win a medal. He goes, you smashed your opponent, and he couldn't come near you, and look at his face and look at his leg and look what you did to him. He goes, that's real martial arts. And I was like, yeah, man, like, yeah, that was, to me, was better than any medal. I mean, that sounds a bit dodgy or whatever, but like, I thought he was going to tell me, like, you disgrace me.
Sure.
Because he said basically, I don't have students who lose, because all of his students are champions, like Zhang Yuping and people like that. In fact, it was a year of training under him before he even allowed me to publicly say that I was his student, because he was afraid that I wasn't good enough. So, you know, for him to actually turn around and say, I don't care about the result, all I care is that you fought hard and well, was good enough for me. So yeah, it was fun, but it was ridiculous.
What you just said is pretty, I mean, it's I had that experience way early days when I was training here with my teacher, and somebody came along and did the same thing, you know, some guy, oh, can I try your student out, and we'll just do this kind of thing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be very polite, I'm not going to hurt somebody. And the guy was trying pretty hard, you know, and I didn't go too hard on him. And then I was eating at my teacher's home after that for lunch, and he was really quiet. I've said that I've kind of related the story on another episode of the podcast. And my teacher just looks at me and says, what do you think I want you to do when somebody comes and challenges you like that? And I thought, let me answer in the most, you know, fortune cookie kung fu movie way. I'm like, you want me to restrain myself and don't go out of control? They said, no, I want you to completely smash the guy. I'll scold you in front of him, but I'll be happy in my heart, you know? Yeah. So.
Exactly. So what was good is that Kang, especially, because he was a little bit less refined, and I generally trained by myself with him. Occasionally I'd go train with brothers, uncles, aunties, you know, or he'd bring guest masters and I'd go to their school. But people would come periodically to the training place. I would never know it was going to happen. A guy would turn up with a young buffed student or an older rough looking head. He'd watch me train, and then at the end he'd go, and then he'd basically pull us together, and then they'd say, okay, go, you two, like play a little. And then I'd be like, in the beginning I was like, what do you want me to do here? And then the other dude would just come out, bang, like kick, full on kick, like chest kick or whatever. And I'm like, I'll look at my teacher, and my teacher's like, oh, go. Yeah. And like, so we'd just brawl, and it happened a lot, and people would come, and so we'd usually fight until like someone got a busted lip, or until someone kind of got overpowered clearly, or if you cleanly like slam someone and like stood over him and pulled your fist like to smack him in the mouth or whatever. If you put like knee on chest, or if we ran up, slam into a wall, or if both of us went down and someone shirked a rib, they might pull us apart. But this happened all the time. So the problem with that was I trained in a public area, and like whenever I would fight one of these visiting Chinese dudes, all the locals would be like fucking yelling for him to kill me, like, because they didn't like it, and they yell at my teacher like, what are you doing letting this slow eye hit a Chinese person for? Like, you know, like it's that national pride. And like he'd like, fuck off, go fucking mind your business, you know. He was like spit on him, fuck, you want me to punch you in there? Like, he was a wild guy, you know, and people that knew him wouldn't say shit because he was from that suburb or that district. He'd been around there for a long time, but you know, he'd try to do it like in the, you know, at the end of the session when no one was around, or we'd go and do it up on the hill. He'd bring these guests along, and I was like, oh, here we go. Don't tell me. And I'd try. In the beginning, I was really friendly with these guys, and we'd exchange names and like stretch together and kick. And then at the end of the session, after a while, I realized these guys are coming here to test me out. And the expectation was the same as your teacher for you, was that I smashed them. And I got injured too, and I had some good runs. Some dudes gave me a good run for my money, but yeah, we had a lot of these like little, quick, dirty, wild brawls, and it was quite frequent. And people are surprised about that, but that's how it is. And even he had teachers come there and interfere and try and take over teaching me, and he'd tell them, "Fuck off," and then they would like, don't talk to me like that. You know who I am. And like they're people that have been around who are senior to him, and he'd be polite and respectful, but occasionally he'd end up like, squaring off, and they would go at it. Like, and then it was pretty cool. Like it was pretty wild. And like we trained in some places where one spot we trained up on this hill where there was just a pitch and then another pitch, and you'd go through these bushes and there was a hidden area, and like every single school had their own special spot, and each one of these schools kind of had one or two tough boys, with a busted nose, or who was always keen to have a go. And if you didn't have a full fight, you'd do something along the lines of a strength test. Like they'd want to do conditioning with you until someone gives up, or they'd like see how many punches you could take in the chest, or that kind of sort of macho testing. And occasionally that shit would get out of hand, but yeah, sometimes it's quite controlled. And but yeah, like the amount of times when we have these impromptu little brawls, it was quite enough for them to have already. They probably were confident that I was going to go all right in that competition, but yeah, that didn't happen around Li Qiming, and he was the one that made the comment. It was more around Kang. He was the rougher one, and my teachers had different approaches. Yeah, so yeah, that's another example of how different it is.
Totally. I mean, I
from what people might expect.
Even sometimes, like it was probably 3 or 4 months ago, I was training in a park area close to my home here. And I deliberately would choose times to go there when no one's really there.
Yeah.
But that day I could see while I was going to my usual spot that there was a guy doing some. I could see it was Baiyuan Tongbei. He was doing some Baiyuan Tongbei basics.
Yeah.
But I didn't go stand next to him. He was about 50 meters away from me, and I was in my spot, and I was just trying to get on with my training, right? And he decided to waft on over because, these guys, like when they come over and they want to try, you're a foreigner. Oh, okay, you're doing martial arts. Oh, okay, let me see what you can do. And I looked at him and I was like, you want to see what I can do? It's like, what is this? What do you expect? I'm going to show you. I'm fucking training here. I know that's
freak show.
That's what's going on in my head. And I'm like, I said, I'm just doing my training, so I don't really have time. And then he came over. He's like, oh, I do Tongbei. And then he started trying to get touchy. It's like, okay, we do these kind of things, and I knew what he was gonna do. So he did that usual high, low, middle. They try to do that main combination, main Tongbei combination, high, low, middle as you deflect it. So I knew it was coming, so I just smashed his arm with my forearm as it came in. And I saw the look on his face. Yep. I knew he was in pain. He's like, oh, you know this. And then he just left. And I was like, yeah, thank you,
nice.
That works.
That's a good outcome.
Yeah, but
that's a good outcome.
I've been polite before, like, oh, okay, let me show you. All right, we'll do a little bit here. And then they get all, They overstep their boundaries. They're like, oh, no, let me tell you how to fix that. I don't need you to teach me anything, man. Come on, man. Just leave me alone.
That's it. Yeah, so. I often stop. Sometimes I just stop. Like, if they come, I just stop, walk away to the side or whatever. Yeah. And also, too, like, sometimes you might get a guest of a teacher, someone who you think is a friend of your teachers, but your teacher's just being polite. Well, this is what happened to me often. And so this idiot would start trying to teach me, and then I would look to my teacher like, is this all right? And he'd sort of go, yeah, it's okay. And then I'd sort of let them do whatever they were doing, and then I'd get smacked in the mouth again or whatever. Yeah. And like, because my teacher sort of gave me the nod that they're all right, I'm like, oh, fuck, he's going to smack me in the mouth. And they get off on it because you're a foreigner,
exactly.
So they want to smack you in the mouth because it's like, oh, I belted the big foreigner. But then that would happen, and then I'd look at my teacher, and then he'd just like do the eyebrows like, yeah. Fucking like, because if he really wasn't a friend, I would soon see if the dude belted me in the mouth or whatever. I'd look to my teacher, and my teacher give me the signal. I'd just like pick him up and slam him, or I'd just smash him back into the bush, or like, and then they'd be like, "Whoa, like what's happening?" Like, yeah, but like I'd always check because I wasn't sure, because some of these people were actually legitimate, respected people, or people that were senior to my teacher. So sometimes they would take liberties, and I'd let them do it. I don't care, like whatever makes them feel good. But if they weren't, I didn't take it, like, because I didn't like it, because I got sick of copping it enough from people that I had to, but then I didn't need random strangers coming along and putting hands on me, and you get sick of it.
Well, I mean,
and also when you
after time, you're just like, just
if you hurt someone too,
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know if you've ever had I don't know if you've ever hurt someone and then
I've dislocated somebody's shoulder.
A whole bunch of people or the cops.
Yeah, I've dislocated. I mean, honestly, I'm very careful of that now because it's become a lot worse. It's like it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. As a foreigner, you're going to go to jail for 2 weeks and then get deported. So, but I've had a couple of injured people I've injured, but even once at the subway when some guy was acting like a hooligan, I threw him into the railing and he got up and he was bleeding. And then he looked at me. He's like, "I'm bleeding," and I was just seeing red. I was so angry at that point that I just grabbed him by the throat and I started dragging him up the stairs. I said, "Let's go tell the police that you're a cunt." And I was dragging him up the stairs, and he ran away. He ran away, but that could have turned out really bad for me. Yeah. So I'm a lot more cautious now.
Yeah. I've had some bad experiences. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been going to China much in recent years, but I had some bad experiences, and people I was with got himself in some serious trouble. And, I mean, and I've heard people, not accidentally, but, in the course of that kind of playing, and then they've tried to come back with, their gangster, people, or bring cops, and, they want compensation. And
it's a lose situation.
And, I mean, I've been...
Yeah, you're going to lose in that situation.
Yeah, that's it. And I've seen other people there, get in real serious trouble, these, just real quick, these Dongbei gangsters were down and they were staying at the university and they were in town for business, and this Jordanian guy that was there, because we showered all together in the same showers, and in the showers he used to just manhandle people, and this guy must have grabbed his wrist and he did a wrist lock on him and he cut his wrist with his fingernail, and these gangsters wanted to kill this guy, and they basically threatened to kill all the foreigners in the dorm. And he jumped out of a window, 2-floor window, and ran away. This has nothing to do with martial arts, but this is the kind of trouble, you can get in over there. And they basically came and tried to force their way into our room. And I ended up having to go with these guys to a room and sit there and drink a full bottle of baijiu and try and reason with them not to kill all the foreigners. And the full yuan ran away and locked the building, and they were in there and they had big 4B2s and a big huge knife, and they were going to kill this guy. They were kicking all the doors in, and he escaped. And I ended up telling this Croatian bird, you better get money together to pay. And I negotiated some compensation amount, and basically she gave me a big wad of cash, and I sat in there and drank with these guys for an hour or whatever, and at the end I said, "Look, kindly accept this token of I basically paid for this dude to not get killed." And this kind of shit happened quite a lot, and you can really get yourself in some real serious trouble in China. So so you got to be careful of hurting people. Hopefully the people you are mucking around with when it comes to these visiting young dudes that my teacher would organise, that was a different matter. It was always, we shook hands at the end, we went and had lunch, we drank. They were never going to complain if anyone got hurt. We were both bleeding, you know what I mean? But random strange idiots that come up and want to test you, I'm not interested. I've had it too many times. It always turns into, if you make them lose face in front of everyone else, it gets pretty it can get pretty hairy. So especially if you're on your own, but for sure. China can be a dangerous place.
For sure. So your teachers, he's passed on, and what do you do? I mean, are you teaching? What do you do down in Australia with your art? And what has your path continued from? On from there.
Well, so I kind of had 3 teachers all along, and Li Qiming, he's the one who was a former Shandong coach, etc. His younger brother Li Qiyu is still my coach, but teacher. I call him coach, but he's my teacher. But when Kang died in 2002, I went back 2 more times, but didn't train. I went back to sort of pay my respects at his, ashes, and I went back to sort of tie things up over there. But I basically made this big announcement to my teachers, I'm done. I'm not. I don't want to come here to train anymore. I don't feel. I didn't want to. I told them I don't want to train under anybody else. He's dead. I was pretty affected by it, and we were very close. And I didn't want to train anymore. They were like, you're here, you should train, come back, we're still here, we'll coach you, you can continue to learn, and you can learn under your uncles and your aunties. And I always had good access to all of my uncles and aunties and brothers and sisters, but especially old generation, 1950s generation sort of uncles and things who would teach me whatever I wanted. So whenever my teacher didn't know something, he'd take me to an uncle or senior brother, and they all taught. It was a big family, so I was lucky. I got a piece from here, piece from there. And he would bring guest instructors all the time in from different families, and he got along with everybody from different Plum Blossom, Taiji Meihua, whatever. He was friends with everyone. So, but I said, look, I'm not coming back. I just didn't feel like it. I kept training here and I kept teaching. I've been teaching for like 20 years.
Okay.
And but in 2005, I went back for a wedding and friend's wedding over there. And Li Qiyu basically he didn't want to teach me as my main teacher out of respect for Kang, because Kang was like a senior brother to him. And so, but he thought then it was acceptable to basically say to me, look, you might as well keep doing your training under me. He didn't expect me to curtail to him or whatever. Like, he basically always had taught me anyway. But then in 2005, he took me to meet his master, who was in his late 80s, and he was from the old generation. He was a guy who was like a national street Jiao champion in the Republic era. He was like a famous for several different styles, including Mantis boxing, and he was like one of the last generation. And he was Li Qiyu's master. He had been his disciple since he was a young child, and he took him to meet him, or brought him to me. And then he said, look, you should continue training, it's up to you. And I sort of went, he goes, they sort of basically put it in like, why throw it all away? Kang would have wanted you to. And it's correct. And from that time I've trained basically exclusively under him, so up to this day. And that means returning to China, and also I brought him out here as well. And he was more coaching me in weapons and Qingdao when I was under Kang. So, I'd do like evenings with him, and like I'd go to different teachers at different periods of times of the day and different days of the week, because I was living there training all the time. But so he's my teacher, and he has been my teacher all along. And since Kang's dead, he probably will be my last teacher. And I've taught continuously since about 1998, and I've done all the way from teaching for money in a gym to the general public, 3-4 nights a week or 3 nights a week for several years in like a Muay Thai kickboxing gym, to like private coaching, to teaching in schools, to teaching self-defense, to basically gone back to now just only teaching family and friends privately. I don't accept I can't say I'm not interested in teaching anybody, but first of all, no one wants to learn, and the ones that think that they do want to learn, once they start to learn it, realize it's not what they thought it was, so they don't continue on with it anyway. So I get my time wasted time and time again. So I don't advertise, I don't teach publicly. I taught for the last time in a commercial gym in about 2017, and that was my friend Anthony Manning, his Thai boxing gym. And that's one good thing that we always had. We always trained out of a combat sports gym at least every other year, if not for years in a row. And whenever my kids wanted to fight Sanda or modified Thai or whatever, they got to spar against good dudes, like against boxers, against kickboxers, Thai boxers. There's always been MMA, there's always been BJJ in the clubs, so we've always been around combat sports. And if people train under me and wanted to fight, I used to train a lot of people to fight. So most of my boys up until the last few years have fought competitively in various formats, whether it's kickboxing or modified Thai or MMA or Sanda. So but now I'm back to just teaching my kids. My original first teacher, Wah, who's the guy that started teaching me in 92, he comes and trains at my house every week. We maintain a really good relationship. I taught his kids, so his 2 boys, and especially his oldest boy, and he now teaches my youngest daughter. So the cycle continues. And and he's in his 60s, and it's kind of almost like an old man's social martial club now. Like
that's the best.
I don't know whether I'll ever. Yeah, well, that's it. That's where you sort of can take the time to
the social. The social aspect
of
Chinese martial arts is hugely, misunderstood. It's so important. It's the thing that holds it all together, really. So.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's the family thing's no joke. I mean, it's a family structure. It's a family model. The martial arts is actually just the glue, and it is important that you do the martial arts well and you train it seriously and hard and you put the effort in. But ultimately, the relationships that you build, and I've got like lifelong, serious brotherhood they're more than friendships with people that we've been together. Some of my students have been with me for like, you know, we've been training together 25 plus years, but training under me for 20 years. And they're also equals and brothers. And, you know, these are people at the end of the day, as I get into my older years, they're some of the only people that are still left around me. You know, as you go along, your friends drop off, but this core of people and my teachers in China and my family over there, it really is a family. And the brothers from different styles who have done their thing on parallel pathways, you know, that we have really strong relationships too. But yeah, you're right. It's more, it can't be overstated, the importance of the, you know, the social bonds and relationships there.
For sure.
Well, it probably all dates back to the time when they were all basically village defense arts, you know, militia arts, and, you know, and like criminal clans or whatever. There's always been that family bond thing. So, yeah.
Have you dabbled in other disciplines since your Mantis?
Yeah.
Well, what did you?
I mean, I've never stopped training Tang Lang. I've always once I started, I've never stopped, and I will continue until I'm in a wheelchair. So, but in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I've done a lot of grappling. So I started with my kids. Started off in judo. So because you know, I think that's probably the best base.
No, I agree.
Personally, I agree. For a kid in martial arts. Yep. And the methodology is just so sound, and they become so strong and flexible and resilient, and, you know, like the balance, you know, the whole thing. It's just it's a great martial art to start off with. So my kids started off in a judo school here, and it's run by an Australian Olympian who competed in Beijing.
Oh, wow.
It's Matt DeQuino, and he's an incredible coach and top guy mainly, and that's my main prerequisite for training under or sending my kids to train under. Are they a good person? And he certainly is, and it's a good school. And so I would go, you know, every day or every other day with my kids, and he knows that I train martial arts because he used to come and get ready for the Olympics and roll for hours at the gym where I used to coach. So he saw me with my strange, weird martial arts on and off over the years, and it's a small town, so everyone knows everyone. And he knew I had a martial arts background, so basically, I've always told him I love judo, and one day he just threw a gi at me and said, "Get on the mat." And so I started doing judo as an old man, and jiu-jitsu as well. So good. You know, since 2017, and I love it because I compete quite a bit. So probably has been more so in judo, but starting to compete more in jiu-jitsu now. And you know, I'm not particularly good. In fact, quite crap, but I really love particularly no-gi, so submission grappling. I find I can use a lot of my Mantis boxing, a lot of Chinese wrestling, you know, all the leg work. So much of Chinese martial arts transfers so well into no-gi. You know, I love it. I like to control people by their limbs, their wrist, their neck, their waist, their torso, not by the gi. I don't mind. I think judo develops superb skills. And, you know, it's so finessey, and the foot sweeps are incredible. But I'm quite limited to how far I could go in judo, I think, because of my age. But, yeah, jiu-jitsu is one of them arts that you could just, like Chinese martial arts, you could probably just do it for as long as you can move. So
yeah, that's interesting. You know, I mean, your direction, and I mean, there's so many mirrors. I started grappling probably 7 years ago, and the first reason I went was to go have people that I could safely throw around without going to jail, in an environment, you know, that's
exactly
a little bit more open, you know. And I went in there, and it was no gi initially, and it was, you know, a lot of, I was using a lot of the skills that I, you know, developed in my Chinese martial arts on people that don't know what I'm doing, and you know, it works fantastically. But at the same time, they have a lot of things that they do that I learned from, and I kind of just stuck with it. So I've been doing that for a good 7 years as well, and I think these arts work really well together. I mean, but I practice in and out of the gi as well, so just to know both. But yeah, for sure, the methods translate very well, and it's good on you that you did that, and you know, the pressure that you get regularly. So I mean, like the place that I go to it's a full combat gym. So I mean, they've got a Thai teacher there. They've got a provincial judo teacher there who teaches judo. They've got you know, a guy teaching jiu-jitsu as well. and other things too. They've got a provincial boxer as well who teaches a boxing class. So it's good to play with these guys because you get a little bit of experience and perspectives from different people who know what they're doing that make you, adapt, learn, and, apply things in ways that you wouldn't have had a chance to. So it's good.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have to pressure test, and not only that, you got to put yourself out of your comfort zone. And I've always found that the ground was my weak spot, and I always had to be honest, a hatred for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I didn't really like what I perceived to be the culture. I also thought that it was the Gracie cult, and I was I've always preferred striking. I like the sound and the feeling of my foot against someone's face, or I like the satisfying, the feedback you get when you elbow something really hard and then you see the body crumple. I've always preferred striking, but I always thought that was enough. But the reality is it's not, and there are people that will just dismantle you with ease. I always knew that, but I always was not in denial. I always knew it. I always trained around real combat sports people. I knew how good they were, but I did that, I was too high up on my own mountain, and one day I was like, you know what? You can't even do this shit. You're going to have to at some point. And I did wrestling. I did freestyle wrestling for a bit, and I trained under, an Olympic coach there as well. And like I said, judo as a kid, and I played a lot of rugby league, so I was okay with tackling and wrestling, but I had none of that positional control. And the first time anyone goes against a proper judoka or jiu-jitsu guy, you just get manhandled, and it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable feeling. And I love that feeling of complete powerlessness and being dominated technically. And then your eyes open up, and I thought a chance, but then I was basically thrown the challenge, and then I took it and I ran with it, and I train jiu-jitsu in the gi as well. I find that that's the most challenging in terms of the amount of technical ability that you need to grasp that style. But it's really good for you, and you can just learn so much. There are a lot of parallels, and they're very complex arts as well. And if you get a good instructor, particularly, which I'm lucky, I have a really good jiu-jitsu instructor. And judo instructor. So, but it's a challenge. And like you said, it's that testing yourself at power against someone who's trying to put it over you, day in, day out, and being able to walk out of there without a head injury, and, keeps you young, keeps you sharp, keeps you focused. Right. Yeah. And I become addicted, it's not, I do it a lot. I do it probably more than Tang Lang now, to be honest. I probably shouldn't say that to all my Mantis brothers out there. I mean, in terms of hours per week, I'd say I put in more hours in the grappling. But that's only because I can. The school's very close, and, and I really like to roll. I like randori. I'm terrible at the technique of judo. I'm the worst partner. I just love randori, and I love competing. Yeah, sure. I love competition, and I like rolling. You can spar with kind of kickboxing and Thai boxing to a certain age, and then if you're not just doing technical sparring, it just becomes quite difficult. Right. And there's just it's far less limiting to be able to grapple, and you can go hard out. I think it's quite good. In fact, I think my Mantis boxing has actually improved as a result.
Yeah, you understand things from a different perspective. You understand the old stuff from a different perspective. Yeah, for sure.
And I was pulling off stuff in the beginning against people, unorthodox stuff that they had never seen before, so it was working, but it didn't take them long to work me out. And once they worked me out, and I realized that my limited bag of tricks didn't work anymore against them, I was then forced to learn more. And now I know a lot more. And I actually, what it's really done to me is with my Mantis boxing, it helps me to fall into the traps that people who don't understand grappling get caught in when they go against grapplers. Yeah. So if anything, that's the main thing from a fighting perspective, and even a self-defense perspective, actually, just not being a sucker and falling into the traps that everyone does when they go against grapplers if they're an untrained grappler.
That's true. Have you had any injuries from your grappling at all?
Look, judo is just a non-stop injury factory for me. We have a main randori night once a week, and I usually take the whole week to recover. But I've torn my hamstring multiple times. I've broken toes. I've torn rotator cuff. Multiple dislocated fingers. I cracked wisdom teeth, like just like concussions from like a lot injury. But the worst for me is my knees. I've had a real bad hyperextension injury recently, tore ligaments. But so not enough for me to have surgery, but it's getting to the point now where I've got to be very careful, and it's my fault. I go like an idiot, and I make myself the kind of opponent where they have to actually fight me hard enough that when I do go, I end up in a precarious position that means that I get injured. It's normally me injuring myself though, but jiu-jitsu, no, not really. I was stupid enough not to tap to a really deep Americano.
Oh shit! That'll tear your shoulder
year,
up.
And I watched. Well, that actually my elbow went before my shoulder. My shoulder was like, I was like, this is not hurting my shoulder at all. And then I was looking at my elbow, and my elbow just like went, and like the arm gave about 6 inches, and the guy that was on top of me, his face dropped because he thought he basically snapped my arm. But luckily, it was only a partial tear, and that took a while to come back from. But it's because I'm old and getting brittle, and I think because I need to probably go back to doing a bit more strength and conditioning because I do more sessions than I should of rolling, not balanced out by the corresponding amount of strength and conditioning. I do a bit, but I probably neglect it. And as you get older, like I'm nearly 50, I don't know how old
I'm
you
42.
Are, but, I'm probably okay. So I've lost a lot of weight, which is good, and so losing weight takes pressure off joints. But I think judo is really ruthless sport, and if you're not in top condition, these guys are animals. They're physical and they're just monsters. They're fast, they're fit, they're strong. And against old guys, no problem. But when you're regularly going against young guys and competing in open or even just in randori, accidents happen, and it's usually just a foot getting caught in the wrong position or whatever. And the amount of people that dislocate their shoulders or tear their ACLs or whatever, it's kind of just a matter of time until it happens. So touch wood, it doesn't happen to me, but I've got to smarten up and train a bit smarter, to be honest.
I've had my share of injuries.
I don't know.
I've had my share of it. I mean, I'm sitting here right now. I tore a ligament in my ankle about 3 days ago from a heel hook that was put on way too fast in the situation that it was, and it just went pop. Everybody heard it, and so. Oh, no, well, that's all right. At least it's the ankle and not the knee.
Well, at least your knee didn't go.
So, but I've had.
That's right. That's what I was just thinking.
I've had 3 knee surgeries from previously from my other Chinese martial arts exploits. So, I mean, but I'll say this.
Have you had surgery?
Yeah, 3 times on 2 knees.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, you said 3 surgeries. Oof, that's bad.
So, I mean, but I'll say this, and you mentioned something quite interesting there. You're like, you're doing too much of the sparring, not enough of the the conditioning, and I kind of realized this, doing more combat stuff, is that a lot of the stuff we do in Chinese martial arts, which are considered, health building, physical conditioning, improving, we think of it as like, it's a way to heal your body from some injury or to make you better. What a lot of the time it's proactive. It's to prepare you because people were doing things like this, and getting your body in a better condition before that would lead to less injury in a bad situation. So, and it's really important.
Yeah. I think it is too, but I also think that there's a degree of Chinese martial arts training methods which are just destructive to the human body, and maybe more so in these kind of sort of let's say hick styles like Mantis boxing, but there's some that aren't as well thought out in terms of like care of the body. There are methods for looking after you before you get, like you said, preparing you for it, but some of the methods themselves end up being destructive, and I'm probably, people would disagree with me and say that's because you didn't train properly or you didn't learn from a proper master or whatever, but I just think there's no martial art where you don't get injured. You won't. Injured. And there are and some of the things, but you're right, you've got to temper the whole machine too. You've got to look after yourself, and some of these styles really did have a strong emphasis on that, and some to a lesser degree. And I think also too, I was a breaker when I was younger, like a b-boy, and I did a lot of injuries there, and I played rugby league most of my life as well. So a lot of my injuries that I went on to have in martial arts actually had their genesis in breaking or football. Like I had pretty bad shoulder dislocations, broke my collarbone, multiple sort of small fractures, not to mention the head injuries. But football was way more injurious, like as football as in rugby league. and rugby union, but I played league. That I did way more injuries, and most of my friends that played league, and including some that went on to become professionals, all of their careers ended from a career-ending injury. So catastrophic injuries, like you're talking multiple full recos on both knees, just limbs torn asunder. Like martial arts is actually nowhere near as destructive, I think, as things like football. So and you're right. The good martial arts actually do have.
Well, I was speaking mostly from
prevention of injury.
From a Xingyi and Bagua point of view, which is so focused on body mechanics, and it's built on a corpus of gongfa, neigong gongfa that are just working on that. I mean, for sure, there's a lot of we can't paint all Chinese martial arts the same. So a lot of them do have some ridiculous methods in there that are more destructive than beneficial. But in Xingyi and Bagua's side, at least from my experience, a lot of the gongfa that we do has a very, very positive. I mean, when I went to my teacher after my knees, when I first started training with my teacher, I couldn't walk up the stairs without pain, and my teacher just started specifically teaching me certain things out of his Xingyi system that helped that fixed it, and eventually to the point I could walk upstairs without any pain anymore, but I have to maintain these things. It's really important to maintain these things, but they are martially based, so they're developing your body, but they're also they're developing certain movements that are directly applicable to the specific styles of Xingyi and Bagua. So there is a lot to it there.
You're very lucky to but it's also you had a good teacher who was capable of passing that on to you. So even if your system has that in it, you've also got to find a teacher who's able to be of a high enough level to do that. So I can't really speak for the whole of Mantis boxing in saying Mantis boxing doesn't have that, but it definitely does to a far lesser extent, and certainly amongst the teachers that I learned from. So there's not that much of an emphasis on it. There is Nagel and those sort of things, and people who listen might this guy doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to the internal side of Mantis boxing, but there really isn't too big of an internal side of Mantis boxing, to be honest. So people try to play it up and say that there is, and you don't understand if you don't train it, but like multiple of my teachers have said, look, the Qigong in Thailand is basically shit. Apart from the Ying Qigong, like other people won't agree. Other people definitely won't agree, but this is the experience that I've had. Sure. And, a lot of it was imported as well. It's the earliest manuscripts of Mantis boxing basically were ripped off from outside of Mantis boxing and like basically retrofit to Mantis boxing, and that includes the Nagel component. So that might be a bit controversial. People might not agree with that, but that's my understanding.
Right.
Yeah, but you're lucky to have learned that kind of stuff. And I was interested in that kind of stuff in the beginning, and my first teacher that was from Shanghai, he was actually quite good with all the health stuff. In fact, he was a Chinese medical practitioner, and he was able to fix injuries and fix gait and show you training methods to improve like breathing. He was actually really good, so I did get a bit of a touch of the internal stuff, and it was actually very impressive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it again differs from style to style. So I just recall seeing this current, like some of the guys that I know from jiu-jitsu as well, they're like, why they're all going to take up yoga. I'm like, why are you taking up yoga? They're like, because it helped my body and this and that. I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to take up yoga because we've got, but they're kind of finding out the benefits of those things. If you told them 8-10 years ago, you should do these exercises because it's going to help you, they're going to be like, you can't use that in a fight. And then after some years of having injuries and coming into this problem and finding that this is lacking and it's at risk, and then they're like, now I'm going to go do yoga. So, it's just coming full circle, really.
Natural progression.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And, I mean, you do get a lot of people that are actually destroying their bodies in jiu-jitsu as well. Like, so, and the way the game's changing now, with all this like emphasis on leg locks and just like, like rolling around on the ground, like it's totally it's changing all the time. Sports jiu-jitsu especially, and you're getting specific jiu-jitsu specific injuries, and they are looking for ways to alleviate it. So goes the full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, it's been a really good conversation. I don't know if you want people to contact you, whatever contact details you want put out there. If you don't have any, that's also fine. But whatever there is, I'll put in the show notes and you'll send them to me. I'll get them from you afterwards. But, it's been a really good conversation. Very interesting to hear your history, your stories, and your thoughts on all of this. And well, hopefully we can meet in
thanks.
person someday and shoot the shit over a beer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that'd be good. It sounds like we've both come to this sort of a similar place via very similar pathways. It's pretty amazing, that, isn't it?
Yeah, very interesting.
Coming from the other end of the world, and then we're almost a lot of these experiences so similar. It's pretty scary. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for having me. I was kind of reluctant to do it, but it turned out pretty cool anyway. I'm sure I'll listen back and cringe heavily, but yeah,
That's normal.
Again. Much appreciated.
That's normal. All right, well, it was great, and thank you, and we'll chat soon.
No worries. Thanks a lot. See you later.